Disclaimer: these stories were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they are described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. The Seams of the Road. I do highway work. Not the glamorous kind with orange vests and TV helicopters circling while we pour a new overpass. My company leases data from the reflector posts and mile marker cams, those tiny solar nubs that blink at you in the dark like an insect cluster. My job is making sure they're alive and talking, swapping batteries, scraping winter salt off lenses, logging anything that looks off. It's a lot of night driving, a lot of shoulders, rumble strips, wind that smells like damp pennies. You start to notice patterns doing that. Which ramps fill fastest when a football game ends? Which rest areas always have one bathroom closed? Which motel lots are graveyards for single-headlight sedans? And you notice the bulletin boards. They were what got me thinking a few months back, when the air still had that late spring bite. At a gas station in western Pennsylvania, there were 3 missing flyers with fresh staples. I pumped gas, skimmed them. One guy was a contractor, last seen near a state route. No body, no vehicle. A woman in scrubs who never made it to her night shift. A college kid whose mom wrote on the bottom in pen, "Please call your mother." 2 weeks later, I was in southern Ohio, different interstate, different vendors, but the same faces had cousins. A delivery driver, last ping, near construction zone. A teacher who never came out of a toll plaza bathroom. Knew. You could tell, because paper curls a certain way when it's been rained on, and these still had fight in them. By July, my route stretched into West Virginia and Kentucky. The boards were heavier. If you stared long enough, you could play connect the dots with counties and see a slow wave of absence moving east to west along the blue lines. None of them said foul play suspected, not in those words. But there's a way a trooper writes, if you have any information, that means we don't have a damn thing. Loners go missing. Drunks stumble into culverts. A lot of explanations work, even when they shouldn't. I didn't think about it more than you would, except at a truck stop outside of Huntington where an old guy with a hard hat and a ring of nicotine on his first 2 fingers saw me replacing a reflector battery and struck up a conversation. "You keep to the center when you drive at night," he said, like it was advice passed down from a grandfather. "Left lane, where the seams don't line up so well." I made a polite noise. "Yeah, seams," he said, squinting toward the black shoulders beyond the floodlights. Where the lanes got cut and relayed. Where the guardrail sections meet. Things that like the seams look for the slow ones on the edges. It's truer the closer you get to the state line. Truer how? He tapped ash into the wind. You'll hear it before you see it. Sounds like someone rolling their knuckles down a stovepipe. He smiled in a way you don't want a stranger to smile, and went inside. He didn't come back out while I finished. I didn't make a connection until 3 nights later, because you never do until the bad thing starts touching the good parts of your routine. A camera near mile 118 on I-64 had been sending gibberish. I took the shoulder, hazards ticking, and parked half on gravel, half in weedy asphalt where a previous patch had sunk. The night felt sullen. High overcast, a lot of light bounced from the interstate, but not a star in sight. My phone had one bar that flickered like a tired eye. The camera wasn't dead. It was blind. It pointed at the eastbound lanes and recorded frames that looked like someone had pressed a wet thumb into the lens and dragged. Streaks. Blur. Fine, I thought. Condensation. I popped the housing wiped. It fogged again instantly, like the lens itself was sweating from the inside. While I was sealing it, the sound came, a soft, patient rattle from the guardrail just down the slope. Rung to rung, traveling toward me. A sound like a coin rolling across rigid metal. It paused when I paused. It moved when my hands moved. "Hello." I called. Duh, I know. But people walk out here. People hide. There's a look some drivers get, the kind that means they've been in the cab too long with the engine humming through their bones, and now they want to talk to anyone about anything. I've heard confessions in diesel breath I wouldn't tell a priest. No answer. The rattle didn't stop. I stood still until my ears filled with blood. While I took one step toward the rail, it took one step back. Not footsteps, not exactly. Just a shift. Like whatever balanced itself on the thin seam where one panel met the next didn't want to test my weight. The wind moved and brought me a smell I don't have a good word for. Salt, sure, but not ocean. Old tape. Bandages that have been on too long. If you've ever pulled a sunburn in one piece and felt the sting where it parted, that smell. The rattle ticked 3 times and went away. I told myself raccoon. They use guardrails like highways. I finished log, drove on. The coin rattle chased my car for 2 miles in fits, like a dog deciding whether to keep the game going, and then dropped away. The next week I got assigned a cross-state sprint. Hit 5 dead units between Charleston and Lexington, stop overnight at a motel with a manager who owed my boss a favor, and finish up before noon. I didn't want to go back out that way. I went anyway. I needed the hours. You know those old motels with doors that faced the lot and a neon sign that worked better when cigarettes were cheap? This one had added a second story in the 90s and then regretted it. The lobby smelled like powdered coffee and lemon cleanser. The woman at the desk gave me a key that had 23 scratched into the plastic with a knife, like she'd replaced the original and didn't care. When I asked about food, she said the machine in the laundry had microwavable burritos. She looked at my vest and said, "If you gotta leave before 4, use the side door. Front lock stick. You get a lot of highway guys." I asked. "People pass through," she said, and didn't mean me. My room had wallpaper that probably started life as cream and had drifted toward a color somewhere between mayonnaise and Old Bone. A TV that showed local news through a halo of static. When I put my bag on the bed, the mattress sighed like it had had enough of everyone. I'm not precious. I've slept on worse. I showered, propped the chair under the doorknob, and tried to convince my brain that a night with a door you can see is better than one with a hallway. I left the TV on for company. The meteorologist was smiling too wide about a cold front that was really just another name for rain. Between the weather and the public interest segment about a canned food drive, there was a crawl that caught my eye. Authorities continue to search for local teacher last seen exiting the eastbound toll plaza at. The ticker stuttered, reset, and when it reappeared, it was about a county fair. The static wasn't consistent. It blushed and faded like the signal had to breathe. When commercials came on, the sound dipped low enough that I could hear the quieter sounds in the room. The hum of the mini fridge, a neighbor's phone alarm chirping and chirping, and a thread of noise I first mistook for water and pipes. It wasn't. It was that rattle, softer here, coming from inside the walls. A hand traveling along a coat hanger. A spine flexing in a drawer. No, I thought. No, the walls were nothing. A metal grid, a bit of insulation, thin gypsum. Any noise from the lot would crawl through easily. But the pattern was wrong. It wasn't aimless. It traced the seams. I stood, put my palm to the join where one strip of wallpaper met the next, and the sound came to meet it from the other side. The paper was sticky in spots, like the paste underneath had never fully set. When I leaned and looked close, I realized the pattern printed on it. Stately vines and medallions have been interrupted here and there by faint lines made with a fingernail. Straight lines, inch long, grouped in threes. Surveyor's hash marks, mile markers. The grooves darkened toward the floor. At the baseboard, someone had tried to peel the wallpaper up. It had come away in a narrow tongue, then stopped, as if whoever was doing it had hit something they didn't want to see. I didn't sleep. I lay with my shoes on and watched the door and watched the seam where the wallpaper ended at the closet door jamb. It's a stupid thing to be afraid of the point where 2 things meet. But once you hear the word seam said like a warning, you can't stop seeing them. The place where the carpet edge tucks under the threshold. The slit where the mattress doesn't quite kiss the wall. The V of shadow where the bathroom tile ends and the tub begins. It makes the world look unfinished, or like it's always waiting for something to slide between the pieces. At 3:12 a.m., because my eyes are doing that thing where they skim the red digits every minute, the rattle intensified. It rippled along the baseboard and up the closet casing. The little door labeled linen trembled. I noticed it earlier and ignored it. It wasn't a door so much as a panel, one of those maintenance chases that motel builders pretend is quaint. The handle was a simple circle of metal, cold when I touched it. I can't tell you why I did. Curiosity? Stupidity? Maybe because anything behind a door feels knowledgeable. It opened 3 inches and coughed out air that smelled like tarps and wet wool. The rattle came from below, as if there were a vertical shaft full of hanging metal that someone was easing a hand down. I put my ear to the black gap. Bad idea, I know. The cold in my temple made my headache bloom bright. The sound was louder here, and underneath it, like a whisper pushed through teeth, I heard something say on the line. I shut the panel. I pushed the chair harder against the doorknob. I stared at the ceiling until the light outside the blinds turned from orange to gray. Dawn makes fools a lot of things. The wallpaper looked like wallpaper again. The sea marks could have been anything. The TV turned itself off because the cable box had given up trying. I was gone by 6, forgetting the coffee, forgetting to tell the desk clerk that her panel had a voice. I told myself not to drive like a scared animal. Scared ones make mistakes. But the road didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a conveyor. The sound met me 3 miles west. My lane rose and fell in that shallow swell you get near bridges, and the guardrail started its song. The coin rattle, rung to rung. I moved left. It moved too. I slowed. It slowed. My phone had full bars, and I could have called someone, my boss, a trooper, anyone, but what would I say? There's a noise following my seam. When the figure stepped out, it did it without drama, which made it worse. No lunge. No sprint. Just one long step out of the place where 2 panels met, like it had been waiting with 1 foot tucked into the crack. It put that foot onto the shoulder, then the other, and began to walk the paint line with an attention that made my mouth go dry. It wasn't tall. It wasn't short. If I had to swear, I'd say it was the exact average height of every missing person poster I'd scanned over the last 2 months. It moved like a marionette whose master was careful and precise. Its head was tilted slightly sideways, the way animals listen to underground rivers. It were nothing I recognized as clothing. That makes it sound naked. It wasn't. It was finished. That's the wrong word, but it's the one my brain chose. Finished out, like a room with the drywall up and the corners taped. Its surface was matte and pale, tight over angles that were exactly where angles should go. Not muscle, not fat, just the suggestion of a man with all the steps between scaffolding and paint left out. And stitched where you'd expect seams, along the sides of the arms, the outer legs, the line of the jaw. Not with black thread, with something the color of an old tendon. Not sloppy, not Frankenstein knots. Neat. A tailor had worked. You want a face, I know. That's what people always ask. I wish I could give you a face, so you could say it looked like and slot it into your idea of how fear should be. It didn't have one. Not the way you mean. There was a place where the face should be, and it was finished like the rest of it. Smooth. Pale. If it turned just so, I could see depth under there like fabric with a handprint pressed against it from the other side. My hazard lights ticked absurdly loud. The figure matched my speed easily without hurrying. When its foot hit the rumble strip, it shivered like a plucked string and stepped back to the smooth. It kept its attention on me. When I passed a mile marker, the numbers stuttered in my peripheral vision and reset in the rear view like the road was skipping frames. I don't know why I thought of the old guy and his advice. I slid farther left until my wheels kissed the dotted line. The figure leaned, considering. The center of the road has fewer seams. 18-wheelers carve it smooth with their habits. The rattle of the guardrail softened when I moved away from it. The thing kept pace for a quarter mile, then slowed, like a fisherman letting a fish run against a drag. At the next exit, the sign for a toll plaza flashed 2 miles. Those places blaze. Sodium lamps, fluorescents, all the old light that makes a night feel like a doctor's office. If you've ever felt safe in a toll plaza, it's because something in you believes monsters don't like bureaucracy. I aimed for the plaza, breathing hard, knuckles slick. Behind me, the figure came off the shoulder and began walking the narrow seam between the slow lane and the line where the asphalt met the concrete of the ramp. It ran a hand, not fingers, a hand, because the pressure was flat, like a palm, along the seam as if reading it. The sound it made was identical to my motel wall. 1,000-coat hangers singing. The closer we got to the flood wash of the plaza, the more it hesitated. The stitches along its jaw stood out. The surface of its skin rippled in faint, nauseous waves. Half the lights in the plaza were dead. They'd set up new LED housings, and the old sodiums stuttered in long lines, making a shutter speed world. Every time the row over my head went dark for a heartbeat, the figure leapt closer without moving. Not with steps, with placement. My eyes tried to mark it and failed. It was simply more where it hadn't been, like it had slipped through the blink between frames. I took a lane with a human attendant. She was drinking coffee, arm out the window, nails painted a brave red. She looked at me like I'd arrived with 3 flat tires. "You okay, honey?" "There's someone." I started and stopped because the words had too many chances to be wrong. "Do you have a door I can pull into?" "A bay. Light." "Do you need a rest?" she asked, slow, cautious. Behind me, the rattle rose, and the window glass beside my ear flexed. I ripped a 5 off by accident, hands shaking, and handed her 2 crumpled bills and a handful of coins because I couldn't untangle change math at that moment. She opened her mouth to say something nice about overpaying. The floodlight over our lane blinked. I saw it there, between us, not touching her, not touching me. In the seam where the bulletproof glass met the frame, its palm flattened, feeling for entry like a blind person learns a face. The surface of the glass clouded with its breath, except the breath was warm and this was cold. When the light came back, it had moved its hand to the seam where my windshield met the pillar. My own face pulsed ghostly in the glass, and for a heartbeat there was another behind mine, pressed up, not matching. "Go," the attendant said. She didn't look at the glass. She looked at me the way you look at a dog with its hackles up. "Left. There's a maintenance bay. I'll call someone." I gunned it across the lane, ignoring that my barrier arm hadn't fully lifted. It slapped the bed of my truck and cracked. The bay was a rectangle of cruelty-bright light and polished concrete floors. There were coils of hose, aluminum ladders, cabinets with stenciled words. "Absorbent, spill salt." When I pulled in, the sound changed. The rattle went to a low hiss, like someone sucking a cut. I stopped and sat and listened to the world, not ending for a full minute. Then, too, the attendant came around, her red nails steady on her coffee cup. "You want me to call a trooper?" she asked. "What'd I tell them?" She nodded like she'd been waiting for me to ask that. "That you got tired on the road and spooked yourself," she said. "They'll give you a lecture and a pamphlet." "In your lane," I said. "The light." "Been doing that," she said. "We're working on it." I think it's like I started. I didn't know how to finish the sentence without sounding like I'd soaked my brain in old wives' tales. "The seams," I said finally. "Where things meet. Roads nothing but seams," she said. "Even the good ones. You should sit until the sun's up." I sat. I sipped her coffee because she put in my hand, and it made me feel less like I'd been peeled open. When day broke, the plaza looked like any other. Men in ill-fitting polos using cones like they were chess pieces, a state truck humming, a woman in an SUV yelling because coins were no longer accepted. The place where the glass met the frame in her booth had fogged and dried in long, narrow ovals, like fingerprints that had been thinking about being fingerprints and changed their mind. I finished my jobs with nervous efficiency. At each camera box, I stood with my boots angled so the soles straddled asphalt and grass. I didn't step on the drain grates. I didn't let my pants hem brush the line where tar snakes had been poured into cracks. It's hard to live like you're allergic to joins. The world is held together by them. You want to ask, did it follow me? Of course it did. Not with a car chase. Not with a movie monster sprint. In the weeks after, I'd be in my apartment and hear the heat come on and swear, underneath the metal duct ping, there was a memory of knuckles on rails. I went to brush my teeth, and the seam where the counter met the backsplash had a blister like something trying to breathe through latex. I had a scar on my knee from childhood bike wreck that had been nothing to me for 20 years, and it itched deep, not in the skin, but in the idea of skin, like a zipper I couldn't see had twitched. I started driving different roads, state routes with more potholes than asphalt. I told myself I was saving time by avoiding tolls. I stopped staying in motels with wallpaper. I taped shut the little maintenance panel and the only one that had it. And when the clerk complained, I paid the fee and left without arguing. The boards at gas stations still had new faces. The wave of absence had rolled farther west. A man in Missouri, a girl in Illinois whose father wrote, "You can have the car, Just come home." The staples glittered. There's a particular kind of hope in a staple, if you look at it right, the belief that fastening something will hold the world together. I don't have answers for you. I don't know if what I saw is the skin man people write about when they get brave after midnight, or if that thing is just the shape fear takes on the interstate because we've built our lives out of pieces and we know, deep down, that anything made of pieces can be taken apart. I know this. When you drive at night, keep to the center if you can. If something in the corner of your eye seems to match your speed without moving, don't blink between light pools more than you have to. Don't run your fingers along the seams of things absent-mindedly. Some things learn by touch. And if you hear a rattle like a coin rolling down a metal rail, patient, steady, curious, don't go to the shoulder. Don't lean over the edge of the world we've fitted together and listen to what lives between it. It already knows your route. It's been counting the miles. It only needs you to stop. Story 2. We found something in the woods that grants wishes. I'm the only one who survived, and tomorrow I'm going back. The thing about Ryan was that he never committed to anything scary. Horror movies were out. Roller coasters were out. Even choosing colleges stressed him out because it meant closing doors, making something real and final. His therapist called it decision paralysis. I called it self-preservation. When your dad walks out and your mom stops getting out of bed, you learn that some questions are better left unasked. I understood that. Ryan's mom had the kind of depression that kept the curtains drawn for weeks at a time. His dad left when Ryan was 11, and the last thing the guy said before walking out was that Ryan needed to man up and help your mother. So Ryan learned to be quiet, to fade into the background of rooms, to make himself small enough that his presence wouldn't be another burden for anyone to carry. Casey was the opposite. She took up space like she'd been told her whole life she deserved to. Student council, debate team, Instagram aesthetic, so carefully curated it looked effortless. Her parents were the kind of people who showed up to every event with professional cameras, who had her entire academic future mapped out on a literal poster board in their home office. Yale, then law school, then partnership in her father's firm. The thing was, Casey actually wanted none of that. She told me once, sophomore year, that she wished she could just work in a plant nursery, spend her days with her hands in dirt, helping things grow. But she'd said it like it was a joke, like the idea of disappointing her parents was so unthinkable it could only exist as fantasy. And Luke was more complicated than I wanted him to be. He was tall, yeah, played varsity football, had the kind of easy confidence that came from never being told he couldn't do something. But here's the thing nobody else seemed to notice. Luke's dad hit him. Not often enough to leave marks that lasted, but enough. I'd seen Luke flinch once when Ryan clapped him on the shoulder too suddenly. Seen the way he stood sometimes, favoring his left side like his ribs were sore. He never talked about it, and I never asked, but it was there between us like smoke. That's why he cheated on Casey, probably. Self-sabotage as a kind of protection. If you ruin it first, nobody can take it from you. I understood the logic even if I hated what it did to her. Even if watching her take him back felt like watching someone walk into traffic. Me? I was just trying to get through high school without my own damage becoming everyone else's problem. The folklore started on a Reddit thread. Someone's uncle's coworker knew a guy who'd gone into the woods behind County Memorial and come back wrong. Different. Kept talking about prices and payments and how everything cost something. 3 weeks later, he drove his truck into the lake with his whole family inside. It's bullshit, Ryan had said when Casey first brought it up, but his fingers were already drumming that nervous pattern on his knee. The one that meant he was thinking about it too hard, letting it get under his skin. Probably, Casey said. She was scrolling through satellite images of the hospital on her phone, zooming in on the forest that pressed against its southern edge. But wouldn't it be cool to check out? Just the hospital, I mean. Urban exploration. The hospital had been abandoned since 2003. County Memorial, built in the 40s, shut down after some Medicare fraud thing bankrupted the board. 6 stories of brick and broken windows, wrapped in chain link and covered in the kind of graffiti that suggested people came here specifically to be forgotten. The forest beyond it was old-growth pine, dense enough that hikers got lost every few years. Search parties, helicopters, the whole production. Sometimes they found the bodies. We were standing by Casey's locker between the third and fourth period when she pitched the idea. Ryan looked like he wanted to crawl into the ventilation system. I was trying to figure out how to say no without sounding as scared as I felt when Luke appeared. He had this way of moving through crowds like they were designed to part for him. People just stepped aside. He came up behind Casey and wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her off her feet. She shrieked, kicking her legs, laughing in that way that made my stomach hurt. "What are we talking about?" Luke asked, setting her down. Casey turned in his arms, already grinning. "The hospital. The one with the woods out back. We're thinking of exploring it." "Sounds boring," Luke said, but he was looking at me when he said it, one eyebrow raised. "Unless you're afraid." There it was. The hook. Luke knew exactly what he was doing. He'd been doing it since middle school, this casual needling that made saying no feel like admitting weakness. It was manipulative and obvious, and it worked anyway, because I was 17 and stupid. "Tonight," I said. 7 o'clock. Luke smiled. Ryan looked like he might throw up. I told my parents I was sleeping at Ryan's. They barely looked up from their respective screens. My dad worked in insurance, my mom taught elementary school, and both of them seemed relieved I had friends to occupy my time. Teenagers were a mystery they decided not to solve. I climbed out my bedroom window at 6:30, dropping into the backyard with an impact that made my ankles ache. My bike was old, inherited from a cousin, and the chain made a clicking sound that seemed too loud in the quiet suburban evening. I texted Ryan that I was heading out. He sent back a thumbs up and nothing else. The hospital was 4 miles away, past a nice part of town and into the part where houses had bars on the windows. The sun was setting, turning the sky the color of a bruise. By the time I reached the parking lot, full dark had fallen. The place looked worse than the photos suggested. The fog was real, thick enough that it pooled in low spots like something liquid. The hospital loomed beyond it, all those shattered windows like eye sockets in a skull. Someone had painted Memento Mori across the main entrance in dripping red letters. My breath came out in the clouds. October in New England, the kind of cold that got into your bones and stayed there. I tried Ryan's phone. It went straight to voicemail. Casey rang 4 times and went to her cheerful recording. I took a photo, posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Bad decisions loading," and watched it get 3 likes before I'd even pocketed my phone. Headlights swept across the lot. Luke's Camaro, black and impractical, his dad's cast-off. The engine ticked as it cooled. Luke climbed out first, Casey from the passenger side. She was wearing his Letterman jacket over her hoodie, drowning in it. "Jesus," Luke said, breath fogging. "It's freezing. Remind me why we're doing this." "Adventure," Casey said, but she'd lost some of that enthusiasm from earlier. She looked small in the empty parking lot, younger than usual. "Ryan's not here yet," I said. Luke snorted, probably chickened out. Then we heard the bike. Ryan came pedaling into the lot like he was being chased, skidding to a stop next to mine. His helmet was crooked, his face flushed red from cold and exertion. "Where the hell were you?" I asked. "I called. Got lost," Ryan panted. "No signal out here. Everything looks the same in the dark." Casey was staring at the hospital now, really looking at it. "Maybe this is stupid," she said quietly. "Maybe we should just go home." "We drove all the way out here," Luke said. He was already walking toward the building, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. "Come on." We followed the fence line around to the back. Up close, the hospital felt worse. Bigger, more present, like it was aware of us in some fundamental way. The windows on the ground floor were boarded over, but higher up they gaped open, and I kept expecting to see movement in them. A face, a hand. Ryan was breathing too fast, that panicky rhythm that meant he was spiraling. I'd seen it before, usually during tests or when his mom called during school. The forest pressed against the fence, trees so dense they looked solid. Pine and oak and something that made the air smell like decay. We found a spot where someone had cut the chain link and peeled it back like the lid on a can. "So we're really doing this?" Casey asked. Nobody answered. Luke went first, ducking through. Then Casey. Then me and Ryan, who looked like he was walking to his execution. The forest was colder. That shouldn't have been possible, but it was. Our phone lights made narrow tunnels in the dark, catching on bark and exposed roots and something that might have been animal bones. We walked single file, nobody speaking. There was no path, just trees and darkness and the sound of our breathing. 5 minutes in, Luke stopped. "This is stupid," he said. "There's nothing here. Let's go back. Check out the hospital instead." "Yeah," Casey said quickly. "The hospital. Better idea." We turned around. That's when something moved in the trees behind us. Heavy, deliberate. The sound of something large displacing air. Casey backed into Luke, grabbing his arm. Ryan had gone statue still, and when I looked at him, his face had lost all color. "Animal," Luke said, but his voice was wrong. Too high. The thing moved again. Closer. And with it came a sound like wind chimes made of bone, a clicking rattle that made my teeth ache. It stepped into the light. I want to tell you I processed what I was seeing. Then my brain took in the details and categorized them in any useful way. But that's not what happened. What happened was my mind just stopped, like a computer program hitting a fatal error. 7 feet tall, maybe more. A shape that suggested a body, but refused to confirm one. Draped in moss and forest rot, organic material that might have been fabric or flesh or something in between. And the head. God, a deer's skull, bleached white, antlers spreading like broken fingers. Around its neck, strung on what looked like sinew, hung dozens of teeth. Human teeth, maybe, or animals. The distinction seemed less important than the fact of their existence. It had no eyes, but I felt it looking at us. Looking into us. Luke made a sound I'd never heard him make before, something between a sob and a laugh. The thing's jaw opened. Not like a jaw should, but hinging wrong, too wide. And when it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere. From inside my skull, and from the ground, and from the air itself. "You come to wish." The words scraped like rusted metal dragging across bone. "All of you must wish." Casey was crying. I could hear it, small hitching sobs behind me, but I couldn't turn to look at her. Couldn't stop staring at the creature, at the way it seemed to shift and settle like it wasn't quite solid, wasn't quite real. The skull twitched toward Ryan. Ryan opened his mouth. I closed it. His hands were shaking so badly I could see it even in the bad light. "Wish," the creature said, and its voice got louder, resonant, shaking the trees. "Wish now." "I wish," Ryan started, then stopped. His voice was barely a whisper. "I wish to know if God is real. I don't know what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe for the thing to laugh or vanish or tell us we were all idiots playing with urban legends. But that's not what happened. The creature convulsed. Its body, that shapeless mass, began twitching violently, and the deer's skull lurched sideways at an angle that made my stomach turn. The bone necklace rattled in the opposite direction, spinning, and the sound it made was like grinding vertebrae. Ryan screamed. Not a shout or a yell. A scream. The kind that carries agony and terror in equal measure. That sounds like someone being unmade at the molecular level. His hands shot to his head, fingers clawing at his skull, and then I saw it happen. His head was collapsing inward. The bones of his skull were folding like paper, caving in on themselves, and his face, Ryan's face, the one I'd known since we were 12, was disappearing into the void it left behind. The skin went slack and then concave, and the scream cut off into something wet and horrible, and then into nothing at all. He hit the ground. Casey's scream replaced his, raw and primal. Luke grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. "Run," he said. We ran. I crashed through a low-hanging branch that whipped across my face, bark scraping my cheek raw. My phone was in my hand, light jerking wildly, turning the forest into a strobe nightmare of trees and shadows and nothing that made sense. Behind us, I could hear it. That rattling. Bone on bone, getting closer. Casey was sobbing as she ran, these gasping, hitching breaths between footfalls. Luke was ahead of her, pulling her by the wrist, and I was behind them both, and I couldn't stop thinking about Ryan. About the way his face had just collapsed, folded in on itself like wet cardboard. My foot caught on a root, and I went down hard, phone flying from my hand. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. I scrabbled in the dirt, fingers finding leaves and moss, and something that felt horribly like bone before my hand closed around the phone. The light was facing back the way we'd come. The creature was there. Not far, maybe 20 feet. moving through the trees with that horrible fluid motion, branches bending around it like they were afraid to touch it. The deer's skull was angled toward me, antlers scraping bark, and the bone necklace swayed and clattered with each movement. I could see details now that I hadn't before. The way the moss covering its body seemed to grow and shift, pulsing like something alive. The teeth on the necklace weren't all the same size. Some were small, child-sized. Others were long and pointed, predator teeth. And there were other things strung between them. Small bones. Finger bones, maybe. And something that looked horrifyingly like a dried human ear. "Get up!" Luke's voice, somewhere ahead in the darkness. I rolled onto my hands and knees, pushed myself up. My ankle screamed in protest, but held. I ran. The forest had become a maze. Every tree looked the same. Every shadow held something terrible. My lungs burned. The cold air felt like breathing broken glass. I could hear Luke and Casey ahead, crashing through undergrowth, and I pushed harder, trying to catch up. Behind me, that rattling never stopped. It stayed constant, rhythmic, like the creature was pacing itself. Like it knew it didn't need a rush. Like this was all part of something it had done 1,000 times before. My phone light caught Casey's jacket ahead, that bright red. I focused on it and used it as a beacon. We were running uphill now, the ground getting steeper, roots reaching across the path like fingers trying to trip us. My thighs burned. My ankle throbbed with each impact. Then Casey went down. She cried out, a sharp yelp of pain, and Luke skidded to a stop. I nearly crashed into him. Casey was on the ground, clutching her leg, her phone a few feet away, casting crazy shadows across her face. "I can't," she gasped. "My ankle, I can't." Luke looked back. Even in the bad light, I could see his face. The calculation happening there. The math of who lives and who dies. "Help me get her up," I said, moving to Casey's other side. We each took an arm, hauled her to her feet. She whimpered, tried to put weight on her right leg, and nearly collapsed again. Luke and I locked our arms behind her back, made a kind of chair. She looped her arms around our necks. We moved slower now, so much slower. Casey's weight between us, her breathing ragged in my ear. The creature's rattling got louder, closer. I could feel its presence like a pressure change, like the air itself was being displaced by something too large, too wrong. "There," Luke panted. "I see the fence." And there was chain link glinting in our phone lights, and beyond it, the dark mass of the hospital. We were coming at it from an angle, not the way we'd entered. This section of fence was intact, but there was a spot maybe 10 yards down where it had been peeled back. We staggered toward it, Casey's weight making every step feel like we were wading through concrete. 5 yards. 3. Behind us, branches cracked. Not the small pops of twigs breaking. The deep groan of something large pushing through resistance. I risked a look back. The creature had closed the distance. It was right there, maybe 15 feet away, and in the better light near the fence line, I could see it clearly for the first time. It wasn't wearing the moss and rot. That was its skin. Bark and organic material fused together into something that might have once been alive, but had evolved past that into something else. The deer's skull was partially embedded in its body, grown into it, and where the skull ended and the body began was impossible to determine. The antlers weren't antlers at all. They were bones, human bones, femurs and radius and ulna, all twisted and fused together into that branching structure. And the worst part, the part that made my bladder almost let go, was that the skull was moving. Not the creature's head, but the skull itself. The jaw was opening and closing in a rhythm that matched the rattling of the bone necklace. And I could see something behind the bone. Something dark and writhing, like the inside of the skull was full of worms or maggots or things that squirmed. "Go, go, go," I screamed. We hit the fence line. Luke dropped Casey's arm, grabbed the peeled back section, and hauled it up. The metal shrieked. Casey went at her first, on her hands and knees, crawling. I was right behind her, and behind me I could hear the creature moving faster now, could hear that rattling building to a crescendo. I was halfway under when I felt something grab my jacket. Not a hand. Nothing as simple as a hand. Something that felt like it had too many points of contact, like it was gripping me in 6 places at once. The fabric pulled taut, yanking me backward, and I screamed. Casey was on the other side, reaching back through, grabbing my arms. Luke was there too, pulling. I was caught between them, the fence cutting into my back, the creature's grip tightening. I could smell it now. Rot and earth, and something sweet underneath, like decomposition, like meat going bad in the sun. My jacket tore. The sound was loud, that ripping canvas noise, and suddenly I was sliding forward under the fence, Luke and Casey falling backward with me on top. We landed in a heap on the asphalt. I rolled, looked back. The creature was pressed against the fence, not trying to climb it or break through. Just standing there, that deer's skull tilted, watching us. The bone necklace had gone still. In the parking lot lights, I could see my jacket, or what was left of it, hanging from one of the fence posts. It was shredded, not cut, shredded like something with claws had grabbed it. But the creature had no hands. "Come on," Luke said, already pulling Casey to her feet. "The hospital. We get inside. We're safe." I didn't know what made him think that. Didn't know what made him think we'd be safe anywhere. But the alternative was standing here in the parking lot while that thing watched us, so I got up and ran. The hospital entrance gaped open. Someone had torn the boards off years ago. Inside was darkness, deeper than the forest, and that smell. Mold and decay and stale air that hadn't moved in decades. Our phones lit the way, catching on debris. A wheelchair, rusted, one wheel missing. Medical charts scattered across the floor, patient names still visible. And 4 stands lying on its side. We moved into the lobby, a wide open space with a reception desk that had been stripped of anything valuable. The floor was tile, broken in places, and our footsteps echoed wrong. Too loud, like the building was paying attention. "We can't stay here," Casey said. She was limping badly, putting almost no weight on her right leg. "It'll come in. It'll find us." "Then we go up," Luke said, gesturing to a stairwell on the far side of the lobby. "Get to the 2nd floor. Find a room we can barricade. Or we go straight through," I said, pointing to a hallway that led deeper into the building. "Find the other side, get back to the parking lot. Get to the car." Luke looked at Casey, then at me. I saw the decision forming, saw the exact moment he chose. "Through is faster," he said, already moving toward the hallway. We followed, Casey between us again, hobbling, try to keep up. The hallway was narrower than the lobby, doors lining both sides. Most were closed. Some hung open, revealing rooms full of stripped beds and broken equipment. Our phone lights made everything worse, turning shadows into threats, making every corner a potential ambush. We passed a nurse's station. The desk was overturned, papers everywhere, and something had made a nest in the corner. I couldn't tell what. Blankets and trash and something else, something organic that I didn't want to look at too closely. Then we heard it behind us. That rattling. Inside the building now. In the lobby. The sound echoed off the walls, distorted, making it impossible to tell exactly where it was coming from. But it was close. Getting closer. Faster, Luke hissed. Casey was crying again, quiet sobs that she was trying to muffle. We were moving as fast as we could, but her ankle was bad, really bad, and each step was agony for her. I could feel it in the way she gripped my shoulder, nails digging in through my shirt. The hallway branched. Luke took the left corridor without hesitating. We followed. This hallway was darker somehow, fewer windows, and the air felt thicker, harder to breathe, like the building's decay had concentrated here. Behind us, the rattling got louder. I risked a look back and saw nothing but darkness and the pathetic throw of our phone lights. But I could feel it, that presence, that wrongness. "There," Luke said, pointing ahead. A door, different from the others. Metal instead of wood, with a small window set at eye level. Emergency exit, maybe, a way out. We stumbled toward it, Casey whimpering with each step, and Luke hit it at full speed. It didn't budge. He slammed into it, bounced back, and tried the handle. Locked. He threw his shoulder against it again, and the door rattled in its frame but held. "Fuck," he said. "Fuck, F-U-C-K. The rattling was louder now. So loud it seemed to come from the walls themselves. I turned, putting myself between Casey and the direction we'd come, and my phone light caught movement at the end of the hallway. The creature was there. It had a hunch to fit in the corridor, that deer skull scraping the ceiling tiles. Bits of acoustic foam rained down as it moved, and the sound of its passage was raw, wet and grinding, like meat being forced through a space too small. "Luke," I said, and my voice was surprisingly steady. "We need to move. The door's locked." Then we find another door. Luke grabbed Casey's arm and pulled her away from the exit. We ran back the way we'd come, but the creature was blocking that path now, so we took the first door we came to. It opened into a patient room, and we slammed it shut behind us. The room was small. A single bed, stripped to the frame. A window with bars on it, glass long gone, letting in cold air and the smell of the forest. A small bathroom in the corner, door hanging off one hinge. "We're trapped," Casey said. She'd given up trying to stop crying. Tears tracked down her face, catching in our phone lights. "We're trapped, and it's going to kill us." "There has to be another way out," I said, moving to the window. The bars were solid, old, but not rusted enough to break. I shook them anyway. They didn't move. Behind us, in the hallway, the rattling had stopped. The silence was worse. So much worse. Because silence meant it was listening. Hunting. Planning. Luke was at the door, ear pressed against it, trying to hear movement. His hand was on the handle, knuckles white. "I don't hear anything," he whispered. "That doesn't mean it's not there," Casey said. We waited. Seconds that felt like hours. My heart was beating so hard I could feel in my throat, in my temples. The cold air from the window made me shiver, or maybe there was just fear. Probably fear. Then something scraped against the door. Not a knock. A long, drawn-out scrape like bone on metal. The door shuddered. Luke jumped back, nearly dropping his phone. The scraping came again, lower this time, then higher, like the thing was testing the door, learning its dimensions. The handle started to turn. Luke grabbed it, tried to hold it, but the force on the other side was immense. The handle turned despite his grip, despite him throwing his weight against it, and the door began to open. "Help me!" Luke screamed. I ran to the door, added my weight. Casey was there too, her bad ankle forgotten, all of us pressing against the door as it slowly, inexorably, opened. It was like trying to hold back a freight train, like trying to stop gravity. The door opened 6 inches, then a foot. Through the gap, I could see the hallway, and I could see the creature. It had changed, or maybe I was just seeing it more clearly. The deer skull was at ground level now, and I realized the creature didn't have a fixed orientation. It could move in any direction, could reorient itself however it needed. The skull was sideways now, antlers scraping the doorframe, and behind it, that body of moss and rot and wrong, and in the darkness behind the skull's eye sockets, I saw movement. Saw things writhing. The door opened another foot. "The bathroom!" Casey screamed. "Go, go!" We broke, all of us at once, abandoning the door and sprinting for the bathroom. It was tiny, barely enough room for the 3 of us, but we crammed inside, and Luke grabbed the door. This one was lighter, flimsier, but it had a lock. He turned it just as the patient room door slammed open behind us. The creature filled the doorway. Through the crack at the bottom of the bathroom door, I could see it. Could see that mass of organic material spreading across the tile, and the shadow it cast was wrong. Too many angles. Too much depth. Then came the voice. "Wish," it said, and the word rattled through the building. "Must wish. All must wish." Luke's face was white. He was backed against the sink, hands gripping the porcelain like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Casey was in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, rocking slightly. The door shuddered. Something hit it, heavy, and the wood cracked. "Wish," the creature said again. "You. Wish. Now." The door splintered. Wood shards exploded inward. A piece hit my arm, drawing blood. Through the hole in the door, I could see the deer skull, could see those empty sockets looking in at us. Luke's voice came out strangled, desperate. "I wish you were dead," he said. "I wish you were fucking dead." The creature's response was immediate. The deer's skull snapped back, and that rattling started again, frenzied, and Luke's hands flew to his back. He screamed. Not like Ryan. Different. This was a scream of confusion more than pain, at least at first. Then the pain came. I watched his body arch backward, watched his shirt collapse inward like something was being pulled out from underneath, and I understood. The creature was removing his spine. Not all at once. Bone by bone. Vertebra by vertebra. I could see them going, could see the shirt fabric cave where each bone disappeared. Luke's body bent backward, farther than anybody could bend, and the scream went on and on until his lungs couldn't support it anymore, and it became a wet gurgle. Then he fell. Casey was screaming. I had been screaming. I grabbed her, pulled her close, but she fought me. Pushed me away. No, she shouted at the creature. At the deer's skull, watching us through the broken door. I wish none of this ever happened. I wish we never came here. And the world broke. That's the only way I can describe it. Reality fractured like glass, and through the cracks I could see something else. Other versions of this moment. Other timelines where we made different choices. Where we didn't come. Where we turned back. Where Ryan said something else. All of them exist simultaneously, overlapping, bleeding into each other. The buzzing started in my skull, building and building until I thought my head would explode. The bathroom walls rippled like water. Casey was there, and then not there, and then there again, flickering like a broken film strip. The creature's rattling became a roar, became everything, became the only sound in existence. I fell, or flew, or both. Time inverted, collapsed, expanded. I saw Ryan's face caving in again, but backward. I saw it inflate like a balloon. Saw Luke's spine returning, then disappearing again. Saw Casey running, screaming, laughing, all at the same time. Then it stopped. Complete silence. Complete stillness. I was on my back, staring up at nothing. No, not nothing. Stars. I was staring at the stars. My hands were on asphalt, cold and rough. I sat up slowly, carefully, like any sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile reality had formed around me. I was in a parking lot. Not near it. In it. Lying next to Luke Camaro. The driver's side door hung open. The dome light was on, casting everything in sickly yellow. I stood. My legs shook but held. I turned slowly, taking it in. The parking lot. The hospital in the distance. The fours pressing against the fence line. And Luke's car. I knew before I looked. Somehow I knew. But I looked anyway. Luke was in the driver's seat, slumped over the steering wheel, his body bent at an angle that was only possible because there was nothing inside to stop it bending that way. His shirt had collapsed inward, empty, and even from outside the car I could see the void where his spine should have been. I made a sound. Not quite a scream. Not quite a sob. Something in between. I walked around to the passenger side on legs that didn't feel like mine. Opened the door with hands that had forgotten how to shake. Casey was there, folded in on herself like origami. Her torso compressed, caved in, her body bent over her knees in a way that revealed the complete absence of ribs. Her rib cage was gone, removed, taken as payment. Her head rested on the dashboard, eyes open but not seeing. Not anymore. I closed the door carefully, gently, like she might wake up if I made too much noise. Ryan's bike was still there, still propped against the light pole where he'd left it. Ryan was next to it. I couldn't look at him. Not directly. My eyes skated away from what was left of his face, from the collapsed ruin of his skull. But I saw enough. I saw the bike visible through where his head used to be. Saw the way his body looked boneless, deflated. I sat down in the parking lot, right there on the cold asphalt, and I laughed. Not because anything was funny, just because something had to come out, and laughter was what my body chose. It turned into crying pretty quickly, then back to laughing. Then I couldn't tell which one I was doing anymore. Eventually, I called 911, told them there'd been an accident at County Memorial. They asked what kind of accident, and I said, "You need to come. Please just come." The cops arrived first, then the ambulances, then more cops. They separated me from the bodies, wrapped me in a foil blanket, and asked questions I couldn't answer. What happened? Where were you? What did you see? I told them the truth. All of it. The creature. The wishes. The hospital. They wrote it down with the kind of careful attention people give the clearly insane. By morning, I was in the back of a police car. By afternoon, I was in a psychiatric ward. They were kind. That's what made it worse. Everyone is so gentle, so understanding, asking me about what I'd experienced, nodding when I talked about the creature, taking careful notes. The medications came in little cups, pills that made everything feel distant and manageable. It was a psychotic break, the doctor told me after the first week. Trauma manifested as hallucination. You survived something terrible, and your mind created a narrative to cope. I learned to agree with him. I learned to say the right things, to show the right amount of progress. 3 months of good behavior, of taking the pills, of going to group therapy, and pretending I believed what they believed. Then they approved an outing. A supervised trip back into the world. "We think you're ready," the doctor said. "Ready to reintegrate. I know where I'm going. I know what I'll do." The creature said we all had to wish. Ryan did. Luke did. Casey did. But I never made mine. The creature is still waiting. It has to be. Those are the rules. I'll go back to those woods. I'll find it in the darkness between the trees. And I'll say the words that have been circling in my head for 3 months, the only wish that makes sense now. Maybe it won't work. Maybe the creature is gone. Maybe the rules don't function that way. Maybe I'm just crazy after all, and I'll wander those woods until I die of exposure. But I have to try, because this, right here, breathing and walking and pretending to be alive while they're in the ground, this is the real horror. This is the real price. And tomorrow, I'm going to pay for it. Story 3. The weird town I stopped for the night. Okay, it has been 3 days since I returned home, and as of writing this, I am still trying to understand what just happened in that town. For context, I just arrived back home after an 18-hour trip from Chicago to Pasadena, and this thing happened in the middle of Kansas. I'm going to start from the beginning so you all can understand what just happened that made me this exasperated. I just want to tell you this story, even though you'll think this is not real or something a lunatic will make up. I just need a place to share this weird event that happened a couple of nights ago and let this entire thing off my chest. This story starts when I was midway through driving in the middle of a small highway that runs in 2 lanes through the state of Kansas, just several miles south of I-70. I actually went to Chicago to visit my family back home after what felt like a year of not seeing my family back home. And now I'm heading back home and getting back to work after the next week. When I looked at the GPS, I saw that the I-70 is heading towards Colorado, specifically at Denver in the Rockies. I thought that it would take me ages just to return back south, or maybe this route would lead me to Utah instead of actually going to Nevada. I decided to take this small highway that bypasses Denver and cut through to Albuquerque instead. After all, it will take me hours to go south once I'm in Colorado. It was a straight shot back to LA, or at least close to it for the most part. When I was in the middle of this quiet highway, my eyes began to slowly droop. My eyes slowly try to shut itself as I drive the straight highway. The road was completely flat during my time driving in Kansas, and it was nothing but fields after fields and occasionally some rolling hills and passing cars. So yeah, this was the pretty boring part of the drive, and this part is making my eyes drop. With nothing interesting in sight for this evening drive. It was at this moment I told myself that I needed to find a place to stop for the night. I was just way too tired to actually drive straight on these Kansas highways that never ends. I drove for I think a couple more minutes before I saw a sign. It was a town named Burton. It was only around 12 miles from where the sign was. It was pretty close. So I decided to follow the directions on the highway sign, expecting it might be a small town or even a decently sized city. Maybe I can probably walk around when I wake up before I leave. Eventually, around 6:34 p.m., I arrived. The horizon filled with the lights of the city ahead of me. It's about time for me to take a pause on my long journey and check in for a place to stay for the night. As I arrived, I began to see the glow of lights ahead. Grocery stores, restaurants, and even a roadside casino on the side of the highway. There was a Holiday Inn by the highway, but I don't think I can waste my money on one of those places. One time I checked in there, I nearly lost a lot of money just trying to check in one time on a different night when I was heading to Vegas. I learned my lesson to finally not take it at face value. I also found a roadside motel within this highway. I drove by next to it, and I saw the parking lot inside of it. The entire parking lot was filled with construction vehicles. Some looked like they drove all the way from Missouri, judging by the plates. Pickups, big trucks, and some heavy equipment. It seems the place is rented out by some construction crew. It sure is a lot of them. I tried to check in when I arrived at the reception desk in a hotel, and I got an apology as the place was full for the night. I continued driving deeper into the town. The highway slowly turned into a smaller main road that spans for just 4 lanes. Burton seemed to be a typical American suburb, nothing crazy and nothing spectacular. Rows of houses laid down in a grid, occasional business on the side, which means it's easier to retrace my steps if I got lost somehow. Driving through the main road apparently led me downtown, and something caught my eye. The road was closed, and not just roadwork. There were roadblocks spanning for several blocks that prevented people from entering that area of the town. And it's not just an entire construction either. The local police parked directly behind the barricade, which meant they were blocking something here. The next couple of blocks ahead of it were several trailers and a sea of cars parked directly within the road ahead. Okay, is there some sort of parade I did not hear about in the GPS? Whatever, it seems to have to find a way somewhere. I took a slight detour and drove on some of the town's inner roads, minding the sound I make, now approaching the different parts of the town. Eventually, I came across a small motel just before the downtown of this city. Finally, something that isn't completely full. I drove by the parking lot that led directly towards the rooms and parked just by one of the rooms. I took a deep breath and finally stepped out of the truck. I was greeted by the cold breeze of the autumn night blowing towards my face. The weight of the fresh air entering my nostrils as I took a breath after hours of sitting in my truck is just something. I began walking towards the reception area of this motel. The hotel is your typical roadside motel with rooms on the ground floor and parking directly in front of the doors. I entered the building before the road, and I was greeted by the receptionist, busy tidying something on his counter. Hello. I muttered a soft greeting, trying to get his attention. He turned around and looked at me. The man looked like in his early 20s, a young man with a pale complexion. His eyes looked a bit glassy, not from drinking, however, but from exhaustion. He briefly glanced at me with a blank look in his eyes, as if I disturbed his work. Oh, hello there. Welcome to Burton Roadside Inn, where everyone experiences the best night. How can I help you? His greeting sounded really flat. I don't know what to say about it. Honestly, I don't know what to expect, really. He takes a good look at me. His eyes run top to bottom, as if he's trying to analyze me or something, or probably he didn't expect me to just walk by and suddenly call check-in. He eventually looked at me directly, and I spoke. I need a room for the night. Is there anything available for the night? I asked curtly, trying not to sound pushy. The receptionist didn't say a single word as he nodded. He turned around and began reaching for the locker containing room keys inside. He reached for one at the bottom, shut the locker, and passed me the keys of the room I was staying in, room 101. Your room is at room 101. Supper will be served at 7 p.m. later, he said blankly. The cafeteria is by the side, he continued as he pointed to the open cafeteria on the opposite side of my room. Okay, I'll keep that in mind, thanks. I grabbed the keys and turned around. I suppose he's not going to ask if I'm going to pay for tonight's rest, but whatever, I can do it tomorrow. I began to make my way to the room, walking towards the general direction of the rooms themselves. I then asked myself, did I just not pay this man a single dime? I brushed it off. I suppose the room is free now, or maybe I have to pay tomorrow instead. Before I got there, there was a bulletin board that caught my eye. I decided to take a look at the massive board stuck by the wall. There was a small garage sale on someone's home, a pamphlet on a care home hiring for workers, or just a plain joke pamphlet stuck to it like if you see this, you are gay. But then there was one big poster that I noticed, or rather I failed to notice. It was a poster, a big brown paper highlighting an event that was about to happen at 12 midnight. 12 midnight? What community event would happen at that time that, for some reason, this town celebrates? I read the poster, and here's what it says. On October 12th, it is time for a new year of festivities to celebrate another year of service with the Lady of the Night. At the time of 12 midnight, we invited you to attend the annual ceremony in the city square in downtown. Go ahead and come on over. We are happy to meet you all to celebrate the night of another year of service. I continued reading it and looked down. There will be foods, services, Darkness. After all of that text, all that's left is their logo, a purple ring surrounding a black circle. This poster reads like this is some sort of weird activity. What kind of annual celebration would have a festivity that happened during the night? I know towns across America have some weird traditions at times, but this right here takes the cake. I have never seen a ceremony happening dead at night that isn't some house party by some frat boys. I decided to just move on and leave the board. I am getting too tired for this shit. I entered my room, and I was greeted with a surprisingly tidy room. Inside was a king-size bed, assuming you're bringing a child, your girlfriend, or perhaps someone you like for a one-night stand, but it's a pretty large bed. Next to it is a lampshade that is too dim for my liking, but hey, it's better than nothing. There's no TV, though, which is a shame, but then again, I just wanted a cheap motel to rest in. I suppose it's not needed. The rest of the room are filled with furniture, such as cabinets, a closet, and a coat hanger. Not bad, I guess. I laid down my bag at the corner, and I immediately crashed down the bed. Finally, I thought to myself, after hours of just driving, I can finally get myself a good night's sleep for the night, and maybe, just maybe, I can wake up early and get back onto the road to finally finish the long stretch. That, however, will not be easy. My stomach began to grumble in need. I think it was time for me to eat for once. After all, I haven't even eaten a single thing after I stopped by Springfield way back in Illinois. I got up and left my room, locking the door along the way. I walked towards the open cafeteria the receptionist pointed towards. I entered the cafeteria. It was a pretty decent-sized place to eat with half a dozen tables for me to sit, and the counter is on the other end, facing towards the door. There were only a handful of people eating on their tables. One family sitting next to the entrance, and a random old man sitting in between the door and the counter. It seems to be a quiet night here. There's barely anyone in here to talk to. I eventually approached the counter. A server was busy on her phone before she took a brief glimpse up and noticed me standing. "Can I help you?" The server said in a bored tone. She put her phone in her pocket. "Can I get some strips and some fries?" I said, "And a can of Coke." "Uh-huh," she murmured, typing on the POS machine. "Anything else?" I said no and eventually paid it up front. "Is everyone in this motel bored or just dead inside?" I watched as she nodded at the cooks just behind the partition, and immediately they began to cook my food. She handed me the spoon and fork, and I sat at a table and sat there. As I glanced on my surroundings, I noticed that someone was staring at me. I saw a faint, shiny glimmer of someone's eye locked towards me behind a window. I saw the eye locked in directly towards me behind the glass, before eventually the glimmer disappeared into the night. Things are getting more and more interesting, it seems. I began eating. The strips tasted fine, and the fries were just bland, to be expected in a small cafeteria of a small town in the middle of Kansas after all. Everything that has happened so far is just interesting to say the least. I don't know if I should be having goosebumps on what is up with the people in this place, or I'm just getting too tired and acting like a crazy idiot thinking everyone is on to me. I finished all of my food, surprisingly ate all of it in less than 15 minutes, and left the cafeteria and went back to my room. I entered the shower, hopped into its tiled floors, and turned the lever on, and water began to pour down the shower head. Thankfully, I decided to actually grab myself some shampoo. As the shampoo bottle they have was empty, it was going to be annoying if there wasn't one. When I finished my shower, my skin finally felt smoother and not drenched in whatever sweat I got myself. Especially earlier where I found myself grabbing a different one on my rear passenger after it blew up while I was driving on the interstate in Missouri. I wrapped myself in my towel and walked out of the bathroom. I opened my bag and fetched my clothes inside. It's just a simple black t-shirt with a logo of AC/DC, a pretty neat shirt I bought from a thrift store, and then some basic shorts. I donned my shirt and shorts and immediately laid down on my bed. My mind began to wander, my breath quiet as a whisper. I began to shut my eyes for the night, hoping that finally I can get back on the road early. Although, I'm still not exactly sure what exactly is happening with me. I got so tired driving down the road that I forgot what exactly I was dealing with earlier. Did I forget something? Whatever, I guess I need to sleep it off. It's not even 4 hours later before I woke up at the sound of knocking at my door. My eyes reluctantly open, still trying to suddenly jolt myself awake from that slumber. I'm desperately trying to fully go to sleep for several more hours. I then looked at the doorway and noticed a figure standing by the windows of my room. It stood there for a moment, standing still for what seemed to be minutes. Eventually, he began to walk off, the lights outside pouring once more. I got out of bed and looked at the front door. I noticed something on the floor. A note written on a piece of paper slid under the door. I picked the note up and began to try and read it, but it was dark for my eyes to immediately read it. I turned the lampshade on and began reading it. Hello, stranger. I believe you are inside for respite. If you are awake for this night, perhaps you can steel yourself to step outside and witness what our high priestess has offered to us for this night. The ceremony is in the town square if you're interested. Thank you, and may the darkness protect you. What is this exactly? What sort of emo goth person would write something this pretentious? Is this a prank on me? Am I being awoken by some random person trying to mess with me? I stepped outside and began looking outside to the person that dropped this note. I glanced left and right. However, there was no one there that could have dropped this. What there was, however, is other people who stopped by for the night, also receiving this message as well. A man in his 40s stepped outside the same time as I did and began to glance towards my direction just as I did for the possible culprit. He then saw me with the same confused expression. Hey, do you know who dropped this thing? He asked, his eyes looking at me. I don't know, I said. I raised my hand and showed him the note. I have one too. Really? Strange, what does it say? I then read verbatim what the note says. Is that right? He quipped. Here's what mine said. If you are awake for the night, you are blessed to be part of the harvest for this night's celebration. At midnight, there is a celebration that will happen at the town square. You can bring your wife with you if you're interested. Thank you, and bless the lady of the night. I was flabbergasted, so now not exactly the only person whoever these people dropped their notes. I watched as others in this motel opened their doors with the same confused face as mine. Almost everyone in this motel got a knock, and even got a note from their hands. So I'm not the only one? I muttered quietly. Well, looks like I'm not the only one awoken by the dead. What's going on here in this place exactly? The man asked, not looking around him, clearly beginning to feel a tinge of terror in his body. I have a bad feeling something is about to unfold in this place. I don't want to stick around and find out what it is. I already get chills when someone or some group knocks outside our doors, but to slide a note under our doors, saying we should attend some sort of activity at the town square of Burton. I also noticed that all of the staff that was sitting around in the reception area in the front desk are no longer there. I'm contemplating the idea of leaving after that stunt alone. I decided that I shouldn't stick around and find out. I rushed back inside my room and began to pack my bags as quickly as I laid down on my bed. I packed everything I had, and it doesn't matter if it looks like shit afterwards. I don't want to know what these people I don't see are planning. I began to race back to my truck, placing all of my belongings inside in a rush straight to my back seat. You're leaving? The man asked with a confused look. It seems as if he is considering the idea. Yeah, I don't want to know what this is about. I blurted out without looking at him. I hurried back inside my truck and began to twist the ignition. The engine fired back to life as I put my truck to reverse back and slowly but surely drove out of the parking lot of this motel. I forgot to pay the room for the motel, but whatever, I don't want to stick around and find out. Before I drove off, I saw two people wearing what seemed to be white masks. Both seemed to lack any feature, but nonetheless a mask standing just by the entrance of the motel. They both looked at me silently. They both did not move a single inch out of their spot, almost as if they were just observing me, observing everyone in the motel. I drove towards the direction of the next highway, although this one, I have to drive through the downtown area of this place, the same place where the town square would be before I reached the highway and returned back to my drive. Due to the roadblocks the local police placed blocking anyone coming from the residential road from entering, I have no choice but to drive at the exact route the town wanted to lead me to. The road led me directly to the downtown of the town. Just as what the poster said attached on the motel's bulletin board, there was an event going on in this town. More than a dozen cars parked on the side of the road. People are heading straight toward the square, where I notice something odd as I try to pass by. Hanging on the poles of each street lights itself, a banner with a symbol on it. It is a purple ring that surrounds a black circle. I remember this was the same symbol that is on that poster that I read hours ago, all the way back at the motel. This has to be that event that is happening in this place. The people walking toward the square are all wearing this white, featureless mask. Men, women, and even children are outside in the middle of midnight, all wearing this white mask. I try to pass by the growing crowd of people just blocks before the actual city square, squeezing all of the space I got from the sea of parked cars parked at the side of the road. I squeezed through the sea or people walking by, and eventually I saw the actual square itself. Although I was expecting a city square with a statue on it, which is very common just by the U.S. East when I drove by places such as Point Pleasant in Virginia during my short trip to the Appalachia. This one, however, has an open field with bricked ground that signals the age of the town. Within this open field is a decently sized stage placed just by the front of the clock tower. I tried to get a better view of the stage, but the amount of people pouring in did not stop. More and more people wearing masks began to walk towards the center, eventually even stopping walking altogether in front of my truck. I wanted to honk at the people in front of me, but I have a feeling these guys will not take it kindly for me, probably even disturbing whatever this is. Did I mention this earlier? I cracked my window just a bit as I drove by the crowd so air could get through, and I heard barely any words spoken by people, only the footsteps they made. An event this large for some reason. Not a single person spoke a word as they walked by, not even a murmur, whisper, or even just any breathy words. I slowly squeezed my truck through the crowd, but it was no use. People are actually now standing in front of me, all staring towards the stage. I began to peer towards the clock of my truck. It was exactly 12 o'clock midnight. Damn, it's the same time whatever this poster said. At least, that's what I remembered before I slept. Whatever this is, it's going to begin right now. As I looked ahead, I began to watch the stage, now being filled with people on top of the platform. I couldn't get a good view of what exactly I saw, but I caught a slight glimpse of people in full black robes. You know those cliché robes that for some reason every single cult wears when they want to look spooky. I watched what seemed to be like 5 people standing by the stage, all collecting themselves on top of the stage. As the event seemed to start, a pale person stood directly at the center. I wondered what exactly I stumbled into, but at the same time, I don't exactly want to find out what I just got myself into. I think I got into something big. Whatever this harvest is, this ain't it. I attempt to drive slowly through the crowd, but they don't seem to move at all, even when my engines are running directly next to them. After what seems to be an eternity, the person on the stage eventually spoke. Thank you all for attending our annual harvest of the night. It's a pleasure for all of our townspeople to attend the celebration. I heard what the lady said. All right, it's something I've not witnessed before, and whatever it was gave me goosebumps. I'm now stuck in the middle of a worship of whatever this is, and people just won't goddamn move, at least for me. I feel like I'm trapped, forced to listen to whoever this ghostly woman is about to say next. Tonight, folks, we will witness the arrival of our chosen for this night's celebration. Our mistress will have a word of wisdom to share for our children within this sanctum. I only heard just as some of the masked people began to look towards me, not all but some. It is wise for all of us to show our Mother Superior the respect she deserves, for she will arrive soon. As the words of this woman resonate within my truck, the desire to just leave is getting stronger and stronger. I don't like sitting in here, watching whoever this chosen would be. We have an interloper here, one of the masked men said. With a single shout from a man, suddenly every single person in the entire square looked in my general direction. I don't see any of their faces with those masks, but I know these people are not pleased at my presence at all. This is it. I need to make a decision. I have to definitely leave this square right now. With so many people standing in front of me, I don't know if I should ram them off the road or just nudge them slowly. I have no choice. It's do it or don't, and I am doing it. We have new blood in our town, one man said. What shall we do to this man? A woman on a different side of my truck asked. We will bring them upon the sanctuary of Our Lady, one bickered. I looked at the stage once more. The pale woman began to pay more attention to the commotion that was beginning to grow around me. The chants continued. It was nothing short of horrifying to hear it in a circle. To think I managed to get myself stuck with these lunatics will never leave my memory forever. Then, breaking the chants, the pale woman spoke. We have a visitor. It appears Our Lady did answer our calls. Children, bring the guest to me. the pale woman commanded. Before I even began my plan for escape, one of the people began to whip out an entire machete, and I saw a glimmer of the blade as it swung towards me. Crack! My truck's windshield immediately shattered, spraying debris on the dashboard. Soon, more and more came out with some sort of weapon, a stick, a bat, and a knife. One of them even swung their own handbag to the windows of my truck, creating a loud thud on my truck that honestly frightened me more than anything. I began to mash the gas, but I watched as more and more people began to swarm my truck, feeling more and more boxed in with these people. Join us. The mistress wants you. We will offer you to the Dark Lady. Our mother told us you are worthy. All of these chants uttered by these crazy lunatics blocking my way. Before long, I thought my truck was going to be smashed by them, dragged me out of my truck, and brought to whoever their leader was in this place. The thought of it made me shudder to the core. I continued to mash the gas, try not to run someone over, because it might create a mountain of people that even my wheels couldn't spin on the pavement anymore and leave me stuck. People continued to smash my windows, trying as hard as they could to break the windows. I found myself a frightened mess, trying to continue to nudge them to move out with the gas pedals. After what seemed like an eternity of trying to move, I looked at my rear-view mirror and saw a glimpse of flashing red and blue lights just in the distance. The police are here, and these people immediately looked at the police car behind me. It seems the cop stepped out of his car and then began to walk backwards as these people slowly closed in towards him. While I kind of heard the cop shout some commands toward the people in front of him, I couldn't hear what he said after. The cop is definitely not going to save me with these people. A decent amount of people around my truck began to slowly walk towards the police while the others still stood by the truck. At that point, however, the truck managed to break through the crowd by a little. Not before, however, caught a glimpse of a man wearing some sort of ornamental armor, the one with steel plates that looked like it was some sort of medieval age warrior or something like that. That one, however, wore a metallic helmet with a mask that's shaped like a face, and there's a crescent shape running along its back. You will join us, the man in the armor said in a breathy voice. The man swung his sword and hit my truck's pillar, and it actually smashed pretty good along my windshield, and the pillar even managed to get it stuck there in place. That didn't stop me from actually mashing the gas pedal to the metal, finally pushing forwards through the thinning crowd. As I finally drove forwards, a person jumped on my truck's hood and hanged for his dear life as I sped through the town. He yelled many things, mostly culty stuff like, "You will not leave this place, join us or die," and many colorful words. It did not take long for him to finally let go of his hand on my hood and fell down the pavement. Finally, I am gone from this place. The speed of my escape was nothing short of breathtaking. The roaring engine of my truck sent me all the way to the city limits of this place. As I drove past the sign that led me to the highway, I briefly caught a glimpse of 4 masked people, 2 in the same ornamental armor and some in robes. All 4 just stood there and watched me leave. I finally hopped back onto the highway I was meant to take the next day, but the dire situation certainly told me to just get on with it before I die. The entire experience was something I thought I would never make it out alive. The thought of being alone sent shivers down my spine and made me ask so many questions of whether or not I'll leave that place. But for now, all I thought about was drive, and drive. I eventually stopped at a nearby rest stop. It seems not a single soul is there at the moment, so I took my time to calm down. I stepped out of the truck and tried to make sense of everything. Burton, by the looks of it, has this ritual that they conduct annually, but to what end I wonder. For now, I have no clue. I walked around my truck and assessed the damage. The sword that got stuck on my pillar would be the damage sustained. Well, shit, this is going to be pricey. At least I have a warranty. I tried to yank the sword out. It took a lot of convincing, and it finally did after one hard yank. It's an insanely heavy sword, pretty large too, taller than I am. I placed it on my truck's bed. Luckily, it has a bed cover, so it's no issue hiding it from unwanted attention. After finding out there was nothing else damaged on my truck, I hopped back in and continued the remaining drive, praying I don't get pulled over along the way. As of writing this on my couch in California, I am still wondering what this town is supposed to be exactly, or rather, what exactly is going on in that place. I tried to look up what exactly is the town of Burton, and I found their official website, the one where their city hall announces something, and by the looks of it, nothing is out of the ordinary. I even peeked on some of the groups I saw on social media sites, and all of it, nothing is out of the ordinary. Posts like garage sales, random stuff, or just people doing buy and sell, nothing about that place screams a town filled with weird people or cultists. Speaking of cult, I try to find out what denomination they worship there. I try to find anything that remotely resembles a church that conducts worship in darkness. For all I know, it could actually just be some super edgy people that just decided to attend some sick event that only happens in Burton, but I'm sure it is much larger than tryhards. I don't think it's small, though. The entire town seemed to be involved. The results came out with nothing, no words about anything about that event. Hell, I couldn't even find anything important that led me to that angle. Maybe it was a hoax? What sticks to me the most isn't the fact they did this at night, but their iconography, a purple ring surrounding a black circle. What cult would have a logo like that? I don't think even a typical Protestant church would have a logo like that. There was also the matter of the cop that I briefly saw that flashes lights before I left the scene. I peeked on some of the local news and even news around the state. While Burton never reported this situation, I did hear about it on a different news channel in Kansas. There was a Kansas Highway Patrol officer whose name I will not mention that was reported missing the next day after I left that town. The report said he went missing at the town of Burton, and the report said he was last seen traveling towards the town of Burton around 2:34 a.m. on September 12th. He was wearing a Kansas Highway Patrol uniform, and his car is still at large. If you have any information or if you believe you saw his vehicle or said person, contact 785-296-8262. So, the man who pulled up was a Kansas Highway Patrol officer, and not a local cop. This man actually went missing when I last saw him pulled up on that town square. As it turns out, the cop didn't make it out alive during his encounter with these people, and whatever happened to him, no one has heard from him since. I honestly feel horrible about what happened to him. To tell you guys the truth, I don't know exactly how I would deal with an entire town filled with cultists charging towards you. I don't truly know what kind of people would attack a cop and actually make him vanish. As for the sword that got stuck on my pillar outside my truck, yes, I have it with me. Seeing this sword in person, I have never seen a sword that is longer than my height. I have to drag it inside my garage due to how heavy it is, just like earlier. I looked it up, and there's swords longer than your usual sword, like a greatsword. Those things are longer than even your own height. The sword is also filled with engravings on the metal. Something like elaborate runes are etched on the blade itself, which means it must be something special. I suppose whoever handled that earlier is pretty strong to swing that towards my truck to the point it snapped the pillar in half and my windshield a complete spiderweb of cracks. I wonder if this was a bad idea, though. Perhaps they can find this again? That would be the most painfully tiring thing to do ever, all for a sword. I managed to book an appointment at a body shop to get that thing fixed. The issue, though, is I don't exactly know how to explain it to him. It's a goddamn miracle I managed to drive all the way to California with a broken pillar and windshield. Thinking about it now, I cannot believe I managed to leave that town alive. I don't know if I'm not the only one who stumbled on this town all by themselves. Perhaps there's maybe one person who traveled, just like me, who stopped by the town and just saw a nice town, not thinking this town would be their last place on Earth. I just imagine, like, say, a delivery driver who just wanted to deliver their stuff to their homes. Then he got greeted by weirdos. Hell, there's probably some stuff I forgot happened, like, did my truck actually get keyed that same night? I could have sworn I never saw that scratch before I left Chicago. Everything is just a blur at this point. Anyway, I'm just glad I am here, writing all of this to you all. Honestly, I thought I was not getting out of there alive after what just happened 3 days ago. I don't know if I'm lucky, or I'm just glad someone actually came that day. I'll try and see if I can find anything else noteworthy. Perhaps there are others here who also traveled in Burton before other than poor me. If you have anything to share, please let me know. It might be helpful to others who did travel there and provide them some idea on what's happening in that town. Story 4. The signs are everywhere if you know where to look. Tulips and stars. Goldfinches and hearts. The compass rose. Where I grew up, the symbols are out in the open, painted on barns and houses. Unquestioned, we don't really have folklore here. Not proper folklore like the Appalachians do. Our woods aren't as deep. Our mountains aren't as scary. We have honeymoon resorts and chain restaurants. But the Poconos do have stories. I was 5 when my Oma told me about the old Putty Town cemetery lying under the waters of Lake Wallenpaupack. I was 7 when I heard about Don Decker making it rain indoors in Stroudsburg. I was 10 when I first heard that Lake Prompton Campground Spa was weird. Not haunted, not cursed. Weird. People said that guests reported strange lights in the woods and eerie voices drifting across the lake at night. They said that the woods changed in the off-season, and that was why the owners wouldn't allow campers after the end of September. That last one wasn't true, I found out. They did allow special guests in the off-season. That was my first job. I was 3 months out of high school. Some of my friends went to college, the rest went to boot camp. I was living at home, no plans, so when my dad told me that he had pulled some strings for me to be the off-season caretaker at Lake Prompton, I wasn't in a position to say no. So I settled into my strange little existence. Apart from the schedule, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., the job was easy during the week. Make sure nobody snuck in to have keg parties or whatever. Nobody ever tried. Saturday nights were when it became a bit more complicated. First, I had to open the gate and let the off-season guests in. The fancy cars with New York plates would start to pull up around 8 p.m., and I would go park them in the one paved lot while the guests made their way up the trail away from the lake, up towards a family field. In the summer, the family field was for softball, volleyball, or soccer. In the off-season, it was for, well, that was none of my business, really. I was just there to light the wards. At the four corners of the massive field, there were cast iron circles with symbols inside that looked like hex signs from the side of a barn. There were 3 symbols on the north side of the lake that bordered the field. My job was to go to the field wards at 9 p.m. and ignite each one with a wooden match so that the thin strips of charcoal made burning sigils. At midnight, I would go do the same at the lake, then go extinguish the field wards. I was told not to look at the guests when I did this, and I was happy to comply. The sounds were bad enough: angry laughter and happy squeals, and an awful chattering that sounded like it was coming from the woods and floating on the wind. When the sun came up, the off-season weirdos tipped me generously and were on their way before breakfast. This worked out great for about 2 months. But then Kara called me. We had been friends as kids, but didn't hang out much in high school. I was a stoner dirtbag. She always had a boyfriend on the football team. But I guess with school over, she was bored. Halloween was a Friday night. She met me in the game room a few minutes after 9. The field wards were already lit, and we had nothing to do for 3 hours. She brought cheap beer and expensive weed. We went through both ways too quickly. We laughed. We lip-synced 80s hair metal songs on the jukebox. I don't know who kissed who first. I just know we stopped paying attention to the time. I heard the first scream about 5 minutes past midnight. I stood up and ran for the lake. I forgot to tell Kara not to follow. By the time all the 3 lake wards were lit, the field was a cacophony of shrieks. This time, there was no way to avoid looking at the guests. They were all writhing on the ground, and they weren't alone. Hazy orbs hovered over and around and through the off-season guests. The orbs were whispering a constant malicious chatter. The people on the ground didn't seem to like what they were hearing. The field was a mess of dead leaves, bonfires, and screaming rich people. I managed to ignore all of this and got 3 of the field wards lit. I almost made it to the 4th. Kara must have followed me. I turned around when I heard her yelling, "He's not even my real dad. How could they?" I didn't have time to wonder what she was talking about. One of the orbs hit me, and I knew. I knew everything. I knew that Kara only approached me because she was terrified that she was in love with Sarah Kaufman. I knew that these wealthy idiots used the orbs to get information about stocks and markets and foreign governments. I knew that these words were the only thing keeping them from being mad by unlimited information. I knew that I fucked that up. Somehow I made it to the 4th ward, which I now knew predated the elder Futhark by 1,000 years. As soon as it was lit, the chattering orbs were swept off into the woods. They had gotten what they needed. They fed on the minds of the guests. Fresh memories, new experiences. They consumed stories and gave stories back. It didn't matter that I was fired the next day. Despite needing to go to summer school for business math in 11th grade, within a week, I opened a commodity trading account. Kara did too. Within a month, I paid off my parents' house. I moved out right after. I couldn't look them in the eye knowing what I did about them. Kara had the same problem, I think, She moved to Manhattan by Thanksgiving. The money should have made me happy, or at least satisfied. But knowing what I did about what all these companies were doing, if ignorance is bliss, then this kind of knowledge is hell. I couldn't stop seeing symbols. I knew that those weren't really arches on that burger chain logo. I knew why the mouse ears were perfect spheres on that corporate mascot. Every symbol is a story. Every story is a means of control. Millions of children reading books about a boy with his forehead marked. If they only knew what it meant. Nothing was free of arcane meaning. Nothing was benign. The puppets I loved on TV as a kid. Frog and Bear and Pig. My God, they had been on my bed sheets. And Halloween, where all this started. They told us stories about the veil between the living and the dead. Those symbols, the face and the gourd especially, don't open the mind up to the dead. They open it up to shopping suggestions. That's why Santa immediately follows Halloween candy in stores. I mostly avoid people these days. I don't want to look at a barista and know the awful way she betrayed her best friend in middle school. It's bad enough I know what the mermaid on her corporate logo means. TV isn't really for me these days either. I can't focus on a show. I just see the symbols everywhere. Team logos, superhero costumes, sigils and glyphs, guiding probabilities and steering markets, burrowing orders into viewers' minds. Books are better, usually, despite knowing who, what, when, where. I never get to know why. Why are we at the mercy of these weird forces? Why do these symbols work the way they do? Why are there entities in the woods that can alter us? I don't know anything about the shapes from the woods. I know that they were feeding on our minds, but I don't know what they are, or how, or why the word worked. Nobody else does either. I have searched everywhere from the dark web to the archives of the British Museum. Nobody has ever written down anything about them. And if they have, it has disappeared. That doesn't bode well for me, or this story, I suppose. It doesn't matter. I have told this story to people a bunch of times over the years. And I'm pretty sure that some of the people I told went to the campground and paid to see for themselves. Aging stoner dirtbags don't keep secrets like bankers and bureaucrats. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm tired of only knowing part of the story. Every moment is loaded with information without context. So I'm going back. The campground in the Poconos is still there, but there are many other places that provide the same service. That much I know. Maybe this time I can find out what those orbs are, or who is behind all these symbols infecting everything. Or maybe I will just end up like those off-season guests, screaming on the ground with more information than my brain can hold. Either outcome is better than this. Story 5. I think there is much more to our dreams than we think. I was 20, old enough to know the difference between curiosity and stupidity. But some doors choose you the way mirrors choose what to reflect. No sign. No do not enter. A few weeks ago, I ended up in a building I didn't recognize after a hard day at work. I must have entered somehow into the wrong building instead of my apartment complex. It smelled faintly of dust and warm wiring. I should say, I was sure it was not a dream I was having in a subway train home. I was not drunk. I had not taken any drugs. I do truly hope that I don't have a mental illness I am not aware of. After finding myself in that strange corridor beyond the door to a warm summer night, I did hesitate to explore further in the unfamiliar space, at least at first, but curiosity often overpowers my better judgment. Cold air brushed my face and tasted like paper. On the far wall opposite, a fluorescent light flickered once, then steadied. The corridor took a sharp right, then almost warped on itself before opening to a rather large room. The smell of bleach had a sweet edge, like somebody had tried to perfume it. There was a chair in the middle of the room and a table, and on the table was a stack of thin blankets in once vivid colors, purples and citrus yellows and hopeful blues that had seen too many wash cycles. I'm talking about those cheap felt store-bought comforters. A projector sat on a rolling cart, nose aimed at a pull-down screen that wasn't down. I told myself, the maintenance people use this for breaks. Maybe it was an office building. I told myself a lot of things so I could step inside. The clock on the wall read 12:16. The second hand crept, and at the 47-second tick stopped. I kept looking at it, because if you stare long enough at a thing that's wrong, the rest of the room either corrects itself or reveals the way it has been wrong all along. No windows. Just a door and the second opening I came through. A single vent whispered above me. The hum in the ceiling felt like it vibrated in my bones, both almost silent and almost too loud. Late for our meeting, a voice said. I turned, already knowing. I knew the taste of the next moment before I arrived. Like déjà vu, except it reached out and brushed my skin. He stood by the door I hadn't heard open. Clean-shaven jaw, dark hair brushed into obedience. His eyes were that difficult color you can't name without lying. Gray that wanted to be blue, blue that remembered it had been gray. He wasn't on the older side, just more defined, like when you increase the definition of a photo you took. Hello, he said in a familiar, even tone. You, I said. The word landed with too many memories attached, like keys I hadn't labeled. The person seemed so familiar to me, but I couldn't recall any memories with him. Babysitter, my mind offered, and then crossed it out. My mind stumbled upon scraps of memories I didn't know I had. His voice felt like the voice of my consciousness when I was chatting with myself. I do sound sort of crazy while writing this. You're not supposed to be here, I said, and realized that wasn't true. He smiled with just enough teeth. You found the way here yourself. He glanced down. You all do at some point. Who's all of us? I asked. He ignored the question gently. How are the dreams? He asked, as if picking up a conversation we'd paused yesterday. Fine, I said automatically, because that word fits everywhere. And then, why is the clock broken? Because you noticed, he said, as if that were both a joke and answer. Say it if you like. I don't, I said. I sat anyway. The chair was harder than it looked, metal disguised as comfort. The blankets on the table watched me, folded and ready to be unfolded. He came closer, but not too close. He smelled like nothing. The clean absence of scent, the careful removal of evidence. 20, he said, and let the number sit with me. This is an age most people come for that final time. He glanced toward the projector. The lens caught a sliver of light and threw it across his shirt, a small artificial sun. He folded his hands. It looked deliberate, like a ritual. Maybe he did that to keep his fingers from pointing where he wanted me to go. We monitored. We modeled, he said. We gave you that sense of privacy you craved and the connections you wanted. But why? I asked. Why us, as you previously mentioned? Us, he repeated softly, savoring the pronoun. We gave you doors. We gave you an opportunity. Then you must have wanted something in return. His eyes flicked to the stopped second hand. Let's not ruin the afternoon, he said. The vent above us breathed. The light hummed. In the humming, I heard children running down hallways that weren't there. I smelled chalk and glue and the metal tang of old blood. I told myself none of those things were present. The body argues with logic when it wants to. Do you want to remember more before you forget? He asked, so gently I moved before I decided to, before thinking the question through. Before I forget what? He nodded, as if I'd passed a test I didn't know I was taking. Then do it, he said, producing a tissue from his pocket. With a pen, he drew a door, then added a peephole, tiny and exact. He placed it in my hand without touching my fingers. It felt ridiculous to hold a door made of paper. It somehow did feel right, however. Close your eyes, he suggested. If you want. It helps. I don't know why I listened. I closed them, and the room's orange light moved through my lids and made a small false sun. The hum sank against the inside of my skull. Something unlatched with a click so small I almost missed it. The old house arrived with that rug that made my bare feet itch. My mother was at the sink, staring through the window, as if it had a show on so interesting she couldn't look away. My father at the table, with his thumb pressed to his lip, like he could keep a sentence from escaping. Me in a chair too big for me, swinging my feet. And him, this man sitting opposite, saying, "Can we try something?" In a hushed, reassuring voice people use to speak to a child. We. He loved that pronoun. I opened my eyes in the white room. My palm had sweated through the napkin. The door he'd drawn was smudged. The clock still showed 47. You look tired, he said, not unkindly. You were always there, I said. Was, am, and will be, he said. Time behaves. I wanted to ask so many questions, but couldn't seem to find a way to move my tongue to speak them. Why hide in whatever this is? A room that isn't on any floor plan. I asked instead of a more logical question like, what's the point of all of this? Or why scrub your existence from my memories? Or you said others, like other people. He smiled when I asked my question, the way people smile when a child repeats a swear word they were never supposed to hear. This isn't hiding, he said, adjusting the collar of his shirt. This is where we watch. My voice scraped the inside of my mouth. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the projector cart, his footsteps silent on the linoleum. The projector light blinked, weak at first, then brightened, flickering through a reel of images. Faces, hundreds, thousands. People laughing, crying, standing in classrooms, grocery aisles, laying in beds. One face repeated more often than the rest. Mine, younger, smaller, eyes too wide for the skull that held them. What is this? I whispered. Observation, he said. People have always fascinated us. You live in patterns. You repeat your mistakes as if trying to perfect them. You feel so loud. He touched the side of the projector with the tenderness of a priest touching an altar. Without us, there wouldn't be you. People, I said. The words came out thick. He smiled again, not cruelly, not kindly, but with the detached amusement of someone studying a bird that just learned it was in a cage. Most humans only see one room, 1 hour, one body, but some. He stepped closer. The air between us bent, faintly. Some are built differently. The walls between your worlds are thinner for you. You call it sensitivity. Your doctors give it names. I'm not. I started, then stopped, because I had always known I wasn't quite built for the noise of other people. I heard moods before people spoke them. Sometimes I finished strangers' sentences, and I had always dreamed of rooms like this one. You slipped through, he said, because you remember how. You've done it before when you were small. We told you not to come back until you were ready. What are you? I asked. He looked up, not at me, but through me as if my question had opened a skylight. A question you've been asking since you learned to name things. You call us watchers, angels, gods, scientists. His eyes darkened, shifting shades of storm and sky. We were here long before your words learned to walk. The projector clicked again. One of the images froze. My face at 7, eyes wide, mouth half open. The child me was looking past the camera, up at something unseen. He turned to me, and I realized his pupils weren't round. They dilated vertically like a cat's, or something trying to imitate one. You studied us, I said, my voice shaking. All this time. Through what? Dreams. He nodded. Dreams are the only doors you still leave unlocked. And the others? I asked. The ones who found you before me? They forgot, he said. Most don't remember crossing. They wake and tell themselves it was imagination. That's how we keep the balance. And me? His expression softened. You never forget entirely, even when you try. That's what makes you interesting. Something moved behind him, a flicker at the edge of the projector's light. I thought it was a shadow until it blinked. A shape, tall, narrow, wrong. It folded in on itself like light bending around gravity. The air smelled of dust, salt, and ozone. The clock on the wall began to move again. But the hand didn't tick. It screeched, dragging itself around the face, grinding metal on metal. The sound made my teeth ache. The blankets on the table stirred, as if something beneath them had exhaled. The room's light deepened into an underwater green. What's happening? I whispered. He stepped closer, close enough that the heat from him, if it was heat, pressed against my skin. This place exists because you people believe in hidden rooms. You built it. We only occupy the space you make. The room tilted. My vision doubled. The light warped until he looked like two men standing on the same line, both slightly transparent. Behind him, the shadow folded again, taller now, its edges dripping upward like reversed rain. I want to go home, I said, and hated how childish I sounded. You are home, he said softly. You always have been. You just live on the other side of this room. He reached for my wrist. His hand stopped a fraction of an inch from my skin, not touching, but I felt it anyway. My pulse skipped. The air thickened. I realized, with quiet horror, that his hand wasn't quite solid. The outline blurred at the edges like something rendered badly on an old screen. You feel it, don't you? He said. How thin it's become. How easy it is for you to step through. What happens if I do? His mouth curved, not into a smile, but into the idea of one. Then you won't have to wake up anymore. He leaned close enough that his voice sounded inside my skull. Close your eyes, he said, or open them wider. It's the same thing here. I fell backward. The chair clattered against the floor. The paper door tore in half in my hand, and the room folded. The light exploded, or maybe it was me. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the lobby of my apartment building. The familiar scent of detergent and cheap tile polish filled my nose. My keys were in my hand. The clock by the elevators said 12:16. I was shaking so hard, I nearly dropped everything. I took the stairs. Every landing looked identical, every corner too dark. When I reached my floor, the hallway felt narrower than usual. My door waited. I fumbled with the lock, shoved it open, and stumbled inside. My apartment was empty. Then, softly, from inside the room that wasn't there, I heard him say, "Time behaves. We make sure you do too." Story 6. God lies below the earth. When I was a little boy, my mother taught me that God lived in heaven far away. She taught me that, although distant, God was knocking on the door of my heart, and I just had to open the door to let him in. But when I was a kid, I never felt him knocking. Instead, I would look through my window at the constellations that danced their circuit through the night sky and imagine that my distant God lived among them. Then I imagined that God lived beyond them. And the older and older I got, the further and further away God became. When I stepped onto the boat for the first time, I wasn't particularly impressed. Keel caked with barnacles, and once cheery paints rendered pale imitations of their former selves by decades of exposure to the Atlantic brine. Ugly though it was, the fishing vessel Tarshish bobbed gently in the harbor 30 minutes from my hotel room in Tampa. I knew why the company had opted for a fishing vessel instead of something fast or flashy. It was cheap, sure, but more importantly, it was low profile. The last thing we needed was unwanted attention. It certainly wasn't the fanciest or cleanest transportation I had ever employed, but it wasn't all that bad. The crew qualified among the cheerier examples of sailors that I had encountered in my career. Most mariners aren't all too pleased when a corpo diver intrudes upon their solace. Evidently, I had caught them just before payday, and the company's fee for transporting me would be stacked on top of it. When we returned from this voyage, we would all be considerably richer, some more than others. The captain was an old salt dog hardened by a lifetime negotiating the brine, Russ by name. Russ was a stern and stony man until a bottle unscrewed decades of hard living on the open sea. That night, miles out from sea, he cornered me below deck in the mess galley where I was running calculations for the big dive. The sailors were getting hammered in preparation for payday, but generally left me alone. Only the cook, Hunter, disturbed my focus by keeping my glass full and my plate loaded. Russ, however, did not share their respect for privacy. I endured his apparently genuine attempts at connecting with me after he occupied the seat next to mine, sipping at an old flask. I answered his probes with grunts or monosyllabic answers until he asked a question that caught me off guard. Come again. What do you think about God? Russ was serious. Here was a grizzled captain of 50 years' experience inquiring on the religious disposition of his contracted passenger. I haven't thought about God for a while, I admitted. I focus a lot on my work. Russ laughed. I guess that makes me lazy to think about him so much. Russ chortled. In the open water, sometimes you have nothing but time to think. What do you think about God? I set down my pen and turned the question back on him. Oh, I'm quite sure about it. I've met him, Russ remarked, a broad grin lighting up his flushed face. Happened when I was just a greenhorn. Fell into the water just off anchorage, almost froze to death then and there. He paused. What happened? I asked, but Russ held his pause, grasping for words to describe his experience. I don't remember much. I was cold, too cold to swim. Muscles spasming, sinking deeper. Then warmth, a light in the dark, and a voice. He told me everything would be all right, that he was here for me. I knew I was talking to God. Did he introduce himself? I asked somewhat dismissively. Didn't need to, I knew. He nodded thoughtfully, as if reassuring himself. I knew it was him. I wasn't lying when I said I hadn't thought about God for a long time. Russ' anecdote brought me back to when I was 8. I was sitting in an early morning Sunday school, learning about the fish god of the Philistines, Dagon. Dagon was a false god. He was an empty idol that people worshipped even though he wasn't really there. That was the day I asked my Sunday school teacher what made Dagon false and our God real. I still remember the warmth of her smile. Because God is knocking on your heart right now. He really wants you to be saved so you can spend forever with him in heaven. How can I know if I'm saved? I remember asking. Even as a child, my question was not so much motivated by a fear of hellfire as it was a desire for something. Because God really, really loves you. Jesus is knocking on the door of your heart. You just have to let him in. Do you want to say a prayer with me? I never felt him knocking. I prayed that prayer half a dozen times. First when I was 8, then 9, then 10, and then at 22, with a useless degree behind me, I decided to take matters into my own hands. If contact with God, with a reality beyond reality, was really on the table, then I would do what I must have it. I set sail for seminary, but now I was on a ship headed west. I leaned on the lacquered railing of the fishing vessel's deck and observed rolling waves of brown and green, the sun high in the sky above me. I realized, rather suddenly, that I was not alone. I glanced up at the avian co-pilots of our mission, the seagulls which had followed us from shore. The persistent little devils were drawn to leftover fragments of fish whose odor perforated the air. They screamed constantly and scrapped over detritus, but the presence I felt was not seated in the gulls. Glancing around revealed an empty deck, the crew busying themselves below deck, or fore or aft. The smell of fish, the cries of gulls, and the vision of the endless sea brought to mind the Lovecraft story Dagon. My Sunday school teachers had taught me that Dagon was the fish god of the Philistines, and the Lovecraft story too assured me of the same. My later studies would prove otherwise. Sure, Dagon was worshipped by the Philistines of the Bible, but he wasn't a god of fish. That was a mistranslation because the Hebrew word for fish is dag. When they discovered the cult of Dagon, we found that he was a grain god who had nothing to do with the ocean, worshipped first in inland Syria. No, I couldn't expect to find Dagon in this place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that somebody was out here with us. By dusk, we had reached our destination, just about the center of the Gulf of Mexico. The sun was beginning its habitual descent toward the horizon. The last, gentle rays painted my face orange and violet. The heat gently stung my skin. Soon, on this summer's new moon night, the only lights for miles around would be our humble vessel and the distant stars above who watched over all of humankind with silent disregard. I was joined at the rail by several sailors as the sun's light faded and a new sun became visible to us. Not in the sky, not along the horizon, but below the water. We stared down into the abyss, and a yellow light in the void stared back. It diffused softly through the otherwise inky depths, transforming, by some lost alchemy, black water into crystal jade. The sailors regarded it with suspicion, murmuring among themselves about the presence which intruded on their silent night. I suppose the corporate hadn't seen fit to key them in on what exactly we're doing out here. While the others were unsure of how to regard the unexpected phenomenon, I found the source of that feeling that we were not alone, finally localized in the light itself. I was overcome with the strongest sensation that it wanted to meet me, and it beckoned me closer. I complied. 30 minutes later, I was in the water. The atmospheric diving suit occluded much of my peripheral vision, but I was able to orient myself by following the soft rays to the golden light. It was gentle and inviting, a long-lost friend waiting for me at the bottom of the ocean. Distracted though I was, I made certain that the umbilical which would feed me a steady diet of atmosphere was secure and that my reserve oxygen tanks were ready. After signaling a thumbs up to the sailors above and patting the tools on my belt to ensure their security, I answered the light's invitation and began the dive. The waters shifted and shimmered from crystal green to aquamarine around me. The sea parted for my passage closer and closer to my luminous friend as I strove down, down. Blue lights seemed to blip in and out of the periphery of my vision, stars emerging to dance with their underwater sun on its circuit under the earth. The kelp, mansions of those bioluminescent krill, extended their hands to pull me deeper into their home, children eager to show off their room and toys to a new friend. Shadows of fish and sharks drifted lazily in the green, but never did they dare trespass into the cone of yellow light that illumined me as I went deeper. I saw a manta ray 10 feet wide drift past me, unaware of or apathetic to my presence there. I saw horsefish pull their young along in a line around the stalks of lambent seaweed, and fish full of eggs searching for a place to nest among them. A massive thing was floating to my left. I took my eyes off the light to see a sperm whale floating vertically, one I watching solemnly as I entered its home. The monolithic cyclops hung inert in the water and sang a hymn to some or another diluvian idol, a blessing upon its strange new guest. I was struck with wonder at the life in this alien place that I had trespassed upon, a garden of trees of life and two of every animal. Eclipsing them all was the light. All of the goodwill that I felt from the denizens of the deep were reflections, I knew, of the lull that pulled me deeper still. The deeper I went, the stronger that lull became. I felt my face flush and my stomach flutter. Whether from pressure or desire, I do not know. I was infatuated with the light, that new sun that I had discovered waiting for me far below the earth. Long before Babylon was built, the Mesopotamians worshipped Enki, god of the deep. Enki lived far below the earth in a freshwater aquifer cut from the corpse of a cosmic monster. Enki was the giver of life. He sent forth the fresh water that fertilized the Fertile Crescent and allowed human civilization to flourish. When a mythic hero, Gilgamesh, sought immortality, it was in the subterranean realm of Enki that he found it. Sinking through the garden below the waves, I believed it. If the source and sustenance of life was to be found anywhere, it would surely be here. Jonah, Russ's sharp voice startled me from my trance. Go ahead. I answered the captain through my radio, but continued my descent. We got a problem topside. You need to start making your way back up. Problem? I paused annoyedly, watching life teem through the garden. What problem? There's a grease fire in the kitchen. We got to get you back up in case we lose power. Well, I paused. The lull diminished slightly. All right, how bad is it? Hunter's trying to control the fire, but I'm not taking any chances. You'd better get up here. Copy that, on my way. I took one last look at the light. Its warmth continued to beckon, but the lull that invited me deeper was noticeably less intense now. I felt cold as I began my ascent apologetically. I wondered if it would miss me as much as I missed it. By the time I reached the ship, the fire was out. I was beyond frustrated. The inconvenience felt as though I had been kept from the arms of a lover. My frustration was probably palpable as I hung over the rail of the ship and looked down at the distant, glowing object of my affections. It looked back, and the sailors gathered around me like the flies that attended fragments of fish and flesh in the corners of the deck. What is it? A feminine voice asked as we all looked down at our new sun. Jenny was the only woman on board, and she sounded genuinely curious as she took a break from slurping down a milkshake to ask her question, her lips puffed out from contact with the sweet treat. Policy dictates that I cannot disclose the identity of the asset. I answer robotically. In truth, the corporate had told me very little about the target of my recovery mission. No doubt, they had kept the sailors completely in the dark. I heard it singing to me. Someone in the group said a little too loud. Singing like my used to, it sang my favorite songs. Made me feel like I was back home again and said I was safe. I dreamed a dream about it. Emboldened by the witness, another sailor spoke up. It was like a big, bright father to me. Said it was proud of me. Told me to quit drinking so hard. I felt it too, Jenny said, adding her paper cup to the litter of the ocean. I never felt anything like it. It was an experience. Experience. The desire to experience God had led me to that seminary, which had occupied 3 years of my life. Once I arrived, I realized that I was the odd man out. Most of my peers were there because they had already experienced something in their life that they described as contact with God. Despite how common it was in our cohort, I had never enjoyed such an experience, and it wasn't for lack of trying. I had tried meditation, I had tried prayer, so much prayer. As my studies advanced, I tried to replicate the practices of the Desert Fathers, the first monks, and their precursors in the Syrian wilderness. I studied the deep contemplation of Catholics in the West and the hesychast meditation of Orthodoxy in the East, all to no avail. No matter how much I knocked on God's door, he never once answered. So, after 3 years of study and prayer, I laid down my books, and I think I laid God down with them. When I laid myself down in my bunk, the creak of the rocking ship my only lullaby, I thought I would have dreamed of my rendezvous in the deep, of the lover's lull that called to me even as my eyelids drifted shut. My rest, however, was dark and deep and dreamless. When the rising sun disturbed my rest, it was time for dive 2. This time I went deeper. Beyond that Eden, the aquamarine sea bled black. Inky darkness cut the verdant wake to ribbons that spiraled deeper, deeper, deeper. Deeper is where life ceased. The bioluminescent stars did not follow me. No denizens of saltwater paradise danced around me. Detritus alone offered me company. Flesh from a million dead fish mingled together in a nondescript chum. Although the webbed appendages of some unknown creature would occasionally spill over the edge of the cone of light, nothing ever emerged from the dark to claim their bloodless Eucharist and commune with the gristle of the sea. The darkness pressed against the cone of light that protected me, undulating like tentacles of an antediluvian kraken, wordlessly striving to overpower my shield and add my flesh to the chum. But then the detritus dissipated, the alien limbs no longer trespassed on the edges of the light's gaze. Without the living or the dead to keep me company, I was alone. The darkness continued to press inward on the cone of light. The dominance of my lambent friend seemed threatened by the pressure of 1 trillion gallons of darkness pressing down on it. I became terribly afraid that the deep darkness would choke out the light entirely, and I would be left alone in the great and terrible deep. Yet the lull of that lover far below beckoned me, still into the dark, stronger than it had ever been, and the lull overcame all fear. When Moses ascended the holy mountain, he followed a great light. The mountain was on fire. The people were afraid and refused to go any closer. But following the fire, Moses met the Lord in a cloud of glory. He passed into the cloud, and he was consumed by divine darkness. If God is light, then he needs a cloak of inscrutable darkness to shield him from our prying eyes. Otherwise, I suppose, we would all cease to be. It isn't for man to set eyes upon the infinite. My pastors and my professors had assured me as much. So as I entered the dark cloud of glory, I interrogated the light. Who are you? I'm not sure I expected an answer, like Moses at the burning bush, but I got one. The light blinked. Then it sputtered. Then all my fears came true, it died. I cannot describe the darkness in words, only that it seemed as if I was suspended in frozen blackness. My heart skipped. My insides roiled. Nausea and fear and trembling seized command of inert limbs. The deep had opened its mouth wide to swallow me whole, and its jaws had just snapped shut. In the belly of that whale, I sank. Time stopped even though I didn't. While I was sure I was passing deeper and deeper still, I couldn't tell how long I had been falling. A minute? An hour? Forever? Impact startled me from the spiral as my feet hit bottom. My momentum carried me down, and my back thudded against the shale of whatever diluvian soil I had struck. I laid there, staring upwards, immobile. I suppose that beyond my gaze, far above the black coffin that entombed me, the sun was again setting again on the land of the living while I lay in the realm of the dead, the Masquerade infant of a god I did not know. Surely this is how the psalmist felt when he looked up from the valley of death and begged for mercy from his distant God. But as I lay in the darkness, cruciform across a rocky shoal, I realized that even in the dark the lover was beckoning me still. The absence of the light had done nothing to deter the lull, and it beckoned me forward into darkness with greater intensity than I had felt before. My taste buds shivered with the taste of sweetness and copper. My heart fluttered with anticipation instead of fear. My face flushed. With great effort, I sat, then I stood, then I put one foot in front of the other. The lights on my dive suit were barely enough to illuminate my immediate surroundings. White sand beneath my feet offered the palest reflection as I took step after labored step. No direction seemed better than the other, but the lover's lull pulled me that way, and I followed. I trespassed into the darkness, and a form loomed into view at the edge of my vision, the fruit of my labored steps. A riveted metal hull, blanketed in part by extremophile algae, rose far upwards and outwards and forwards, a fellow alien in this foreign land. I placed my left hand on the hull and guided myself along its length. Painted letters drifted into sight one by one. USS Cetus. I found my quarry. Tracing the hull on my left, I trudged forward in search of access to the wreck. My progress was interrupted when something else came into view on my right. This, too, was huge and metal and monolithic. Another wreck? What are the odds? But as I stepped closer to the cyclopean object, I saw that it could not have been man-made. Angular, colossal, unnatural. The Leviathan object embedded in the silt and shale was cocked to one side at an 80-degree angle. Its surface was sheer, a perfect corner dividing one side from the other, but each face was pockmarked. Holes burrowed into the burnished metal in hives as far as I could see. No deep-sea algae dared attend the object. Its surface was completely clean. By the light of my suit alone, I could not tell how far it extended in any direction, but the USS Cetus had sunk directly adjacent to it. The lover's lull tore my attention away from the colossal thing. The object of my desire was still in the ship. This new discovery would have to wait. Walking forward, a gash in the hull of the Cetus limped into view through the silted gloom. The horizontal rip in the vessel was bent inward at the edges. Vertical ribs of reinforcing metal that had once held the hull rigid protruded from the lips like hooked teeth as I set foot inside the mouth of the great dead thing. Every inch of the ship was waterlogged, but even in its sunken state, something in the back of my mind expected to meet others roaming the halls. That same thing told me that behind the closed doors I passed by, the proud crew was still occupied with their duties about the stalwart vessel. I moved as quietly and quickly as I could to avoid disturbing them. Here I was, a stowaway. Hallway stretched in a hallway until the lull led me to the ship's secure holding facility. The vault was impressive. Riveted metal bars reinforced the steel panels which surrounded the circular vault door, adorned with an equally impressive vault wheel. I patted the tools on my belt as I approached. Pressure-proof power drill, waterproof data key, various accoutrements to get into places designed to keep you out, all useless now because the vault door hung open. Fingers of yellow light slipped weakly under the rim of the vault door. The pressure of the sea had cracked the safe for me. I pushed the door open further, and the light intensified, but only slightly. I noted that the mechanized hydraulics, which once locked the door into place, had been shorn clean. My humble dive suit had yet to buckle under the pressure of the sea. Had this mighty mechanism suffered such a catastrophic failure under these same conditions? I pushed the door further, and it complied with little resistance. The room grew brighter still as its sole occupant came into view. A gold sphere the size of a cantaloupe suspended in a glass canister that terminated into a carrying handle on either side. The light flickered tiredly. It had expended so much effort to guide me down here that I felt it was exhausted. The texture of its surface was imperfect. Its lambent skin was hammered gold, scored by fingerprint-like ripples traced by incandescent silver. Smooth symbols in an unknown script flowed like water with the pattern of the fingerprints. Instructions or blessings or warnings or curses. The glass tube had survived the pressure which had rocked even the great door, though it had been cracked. I approached the asset and grasped the carrying handles. The light faded further, panting with exhaustion, but I had the striking sense in my lizard brain that it was relieved by my touch. And yet the force continued to pull. The same lover's lull, back the way I had come, back out the maw of the sunken Cetus, back toward, I already knew, the pockmarked metal thing. Whatever and whoever it might be, the lover's lull was not seated inside the precious thing that I now held in both hands. Shivering weakly, I surrendered entirely to the lull. My limbs felt moved by an unseen current as I retraced my steps past the halls of busy drowned sailors until the inert wreck spat me out again, and I was face to face with the cockeyed object sitting in the silt. A wound in the object, 10 feet wide and 30 tall, directly across from the opening in the hull of the Cetus. How did I miss it the first time? The human vessel was forgotten, the asset in my hands faded from memory. The lover's lull pulled me into the opening. Even though I knew my orders were to resurface with the asset intact to prepare for extraction, I disregarded those orders. This was more important. A room stretched infinitely into darkness in every direction. The floor was made of the same pockmarked meteorite as the rest of the structure, but no walls could be seen. It was an abyss of its own here, no bubbles in the water, no life except my own. I walked toward nothing but the lull while the asset in my hands glowed as my only sputtering light. The golden sphere fluttered in its new environment like an exhausted dog carried home from a long walk. With its own wordless voice, distinct from the lover's lull, it whispered sweet, wordless things in my head. My mind's eye saw visions and dreamed dreams, hurtling through a dark void, diving below deep water, impact, death, so much death and then life. Mammals growing up much too quickly, hominids dividing themselves from apes, dancing around fires, dancing under golden stars. Love. Then I saw the stars with my own eyes. Golden stars, true gold each one, dancing in a circuit on what seemed to be a wall some 100 yards ahead of me that stretched from an unseen ceiling down to the nickel-burnished floor. The golden stars arced downward on the left side of the wall and disappeared into the floor, only to emerge on the right side in an upward swing before repeating their orbit all over again. The asset danced too in its glass shell, rolling from one side of the tube to the other, longing to join its friends in their eternal circuit. I was caught up with a feeling of sympathy for the inanimate object in my possession, and so I retrieved the crowbar from my belt with one hand and liberated the gilded sphere from its cage. Freed from its prison, the asset was pulled by some force, perhaps the lover's lull itself, towards the constellation. A tear fell from my eye as it rejoined its friends. I knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the other spheres were overjoyed to see their sibling return to them safely. I felt in the deepest part of my soul that the blinking lights of the spheres closest to the returned expatriate were worried mothers and concerned sisters that cooed and doted on the prodigal son as they abandoned their ordinary course to orbit a new constellation around the lost lamb. They spoke in a language I could not hear, but I longed to listen in on the excited chatter that doubtless occupied them. A door, black and rock, and just my height, just wide enough to pass through comfortably. It sat in the center of the circuit of gold stars. My attention was drawn from the sibling spheres to whatever lay behind its threshold. It had never been the missing gold star or the rest of its constellation which had beckoned me here. The lover was on the other side of this door, and not just a lover. Father, mother, brother, sister, friend. What had begun as a low-resolution lull, a thing that stimulated feelings of infatuation and desire, a feeling which had carried me down to this place, transformed now into something else, into an invitation. It felt as though I had done a kindness to my neighbor, and now they invited me in for coffee. Somebody, it seems, wanted to talk to me. The door, something diffused into the water from its seams, not light, not dark, impossible to describe. Color of water, perfect vision, thunder. It heaved rhythmically in and out, seizing breathing like a living thing. Rumble of stone grating stone, basalt skin tattooed with 100 angular symbols. The glyphs resembled what I'd seen on the golden asset, but instead of logograms lovingly inlaid in gold, these symbols were older, colder, hewn into black rock. They must have predated those on the asset. Their shapes were more angular, better suited to a crude chisel than a metallurgist's fine implements, remnants of a stone age long before man and ape parted ways. The resemblance of the glyphs on the door to those on the asset offered only one conclusion. The sinking of the USS Cetus had been no accident. The asset had drifted close to home, and the lover's lull had coaxed the ship into the black depths. I knew that just across this threshold was a whole other world, busily ordering itself as it had since before the dawn of life. No doubt a busy parliament of super-celestial intelligences, antediluvian sages, and paracosmic artists were hard at work sustaining the universe with colors I could not even imagine. I could poke my head in unnoticed, just for a moment, a solitary anthropoid lost in a cosmic orchestra. Maybe the celestial things wouldn't even notice me. I could steal a glance, sate my desire, and be gone in a moment. Maybe I could even say a quick hello to the lover, to the friend, and be on my way. I balled a fist and poised my hand to knock on the heaving door, and I hesitated. Did I really want to see what was going on beyond this door? Was I really prepared to poke my head into infinity? Had I really come to the very doorstep of God and been found wanting? No sound, absolute silence. The door breathed on its own, steady, steady. It had been doing so for all time. I mistook its breathing for my own. My hand fell to my side. If I opened that door, that great and terrible door, I would never come back, not the same. I turned around, sanity intact, and trudged back toward the wound I had entered from, and the lover's lull ceased. I turned and stole a glance at the dancing yellow stars. Somehow I knew that the asset, the golden dancer which I had returned home, was that star, that one to the left whose comrades still clung tightly to it, still busily fretting over its return and afraid to let it go again. The stars called out profuse and silent thank yous, and it broke my heart to move on. Next time, I promised them. I'll stay next time. I have some things I need to take care of. The stars flickered. They asked me, with the tearful innocence of children, "Do you promise?" Leaving that place almost killed me. The ascent literally almost killed me. I moved too quickly, and the depressurization was too much to bear. But the Tarshish picked me up, took me to port, and left the unopened door and its subterranean temple behind. A week into my stay at Nineveh County Hospital, a couple of suits paid me a visit. The company wasn't happy with losing its asset, which, I had reported, had been destroyed by the pressure. I was informed that my hospital bills would be my own responsibility and that I shouldn't expect any more work from them. I get the feeling they expected me to be angry, disappointed, but I honestly didn't see what the big deal was. There were bigger things in the world than money and health. Breathing in the sweet and fragrant air of a maritime hospital, I laid in that bed. A misbegotten child of a realm nobody else had ever seen, an augur of a god I had dared not look upon, and I was alive. The nurse who checks on me laughed at a dumb joke I told. I think I'll buy her a drink when I'm out of here. The job boards I've been browsing show openings for scuba diving instructors. That sounds like fun. The sun rose one morning and again the next. I saw it all again for the first time. As for the lover's lull, I feel it still, but it doesn't invite me back into the ocean. It encourages me to talk to the homeless guy outside my grocery store, to volunteer at church, to pet the stray cats that beg for morsels of food. I never learned its name, never looked behind the door, but I knew it was God. I don't know if God is the reality beyond reality or the still small voice that whispers in our fledgling ears, not yet grown enough to listen. All I know is that God lives behind a door, far below the earth, and I do not need to knock anymore. Story 7. Plastic round sheep. As a child, I was scared of the dark. Now, I'm terrified of it. My partner, my friends, everyone asked me about it, curious about my childhood and the events that shaped me. I really wanted to answer, but it's difficult to talk about, difficult to explain. So I kept it all to myself, no matter how it chewed at me. This is why I decided to write about it instead, anonymously. About how I met my father for the first time, hiding in my closet. I grew up in many neighborhoods. We never stuck around an area for long, and so I never had any friendships that lasted. Kyle, there's one here as well. Mother told me, as always. Another stalker again? I asked. Pack your things, is all she answered me with. I packed my travel bags, clothes, games, everything, and left it all behind again. There was no point arguing. It took a single comment or glance of interest of any man for Mother to deem him a danger. That time, it happened shortly after my 13th birthday, so we moved again from a big city apartment to a rural village house. Just as every building has an escape route, Mother always kept an eye on new rentals. We left within days, lived in the car for nearly 2 weeks, and moved into our next abode without ever having a walk through. It was decrepit, awfully so. It looked like a one-star motel, the kind that could ruin an entire trip. Knowing we wouldn't stay long gave me the push to open the front door. Furniture sat on a rustic oak floor, pieces that might have once been expensive if not for the chips and cracks. A wooden cross hung on the wall, something I associated with wasted Sundays. I set out to the second floor to look for a room to claim. Calling the place a ruin would have been an exaggeration, but back then it certainly felt that way. I chose a room with a view onto the street. It already had a closet sitting on the blue carpet. It was old and unsightly, but nothing that stickers and posters couldn't fix. It took me the rest of the day to vacuum the carpet and carry in my things, while Mother went to buy food after locking the cellar doors shut. Later, I set up my air mattress, console, and a night light to keep me safe. Moving as a child was intimidating, no matter how often I went through it. The first few nights in a new place always brought up vivid nightmares, until Mother had gifted me the night light 2 years prior. Mother and I, it had always been just us two. Ever since I've seen the light of day, my father has been absent. It wasn't a topic Mother liked me to bring up. She never told me what kind of man he was, but I remember the one time she mentioned him. Once, after moving accommodations, as she put a padlock onto the cellar door, she said to me, "Don't ever go down there. Your father's work is highly fragile." Every time we moved, she'd lock the cellar door. If there was none, she'd lock a seemingly random room instead. It scared me, though perhaps not as much as it should have. The colorful digital sandbox on my screen and the easy blue light of the LED separated my room, separated home from the strange, the hallways that felt alien during the day and malignant in the dark. That night, I went to sleep, illuminated by the soothing starry blue, marking my new home. "Kyle." The voice I heard was faint and full of breath. "Wake up, Kyle." I stared at the pitch-black darkness, swallowing my room. I try not to move, but even the slightest shift of my body caused the air mattress to creak and rustle. It has always been us two. So who was that person creeping from my closet? His hand, now that my eyes had adjusted, moved like static to nudge the door wide open. He lurked in there, still just a shadow with bottomless eyes that seemed to grab me. "A blackout has hit our house," he said. He knew of my presence, so I carefully asked, "Who are you?" "I'm the shepherd. You are my little plastic ground sheep," he said. "Do you wish to know?" "Know what?" I asked. "Well, I've been working on all those years. I'll open the door, and you'll come and see." That's all he left me with, all he said, before crawling deeper into the closet and closing the doors behind. I didn't know whether he was still there in my room. Still, I needed to leave. I immediately stood up and tried the light switch. It clicked, but wouldn't release me. The room remained dark. I looked out the window, searching for the safety of the serene blue moonlight, but it wasn't there. The sky was empty as an abyss. I didn't even dare to check the closet or go anywhere near it. And so my only choice were the corridors leading me further in. I searched for a flashlight, letting the weathered tapestries guide my hand. If only I knew in which room Mother set up her bed. The house is huge, and I didn't check and didn't ask, and now I fear screaming, for he might hear me disobey. Unsuccessful, I went down the stairs to the first floor, ever closer to the ground and whatever's below. There it was, the cellar door, wide open with a faint candle flicker inviting me down. I hesitantly grabbed the handle, and with a wild beating heart, I pulled it shut. All I wanted was to escape as fast as I could, and so I tried to seek the neighbor's help. So I tried the front door, only for it to reveal a staircase and faint candle flicker. Same with the kitchen door and even the windows. Every path led to the same place, as if fate decided to stop disguising itself. I took a careful first step down, then another. Every step had me trembling. Why do we bury those we love, pull them further from heaven, and raise a wall of dirt between them? Is it that heaven is further down, and only the burial tradition is what remains of the truth, or do we condemn them to the other place? I reached the bottom, a lone room with old beams keeping the dirt from pouring in. Candles, arranged like a path, pointed me to a hole in the ground with a coarse wooden cross beyond it. I inched close enough to see inside, where Mother was sleeping. "Mom," I called out. Mom, does it matter where she is? Whether there's fire or there's the sky, there's light regardless. So don't be scared, my child, my plastic ground sheep, for there is a meadow with infinite grass to feed on that I'll guide you to. Forgive me, mother, but I ran for my life out the front door that now let me enter into the moonless night that would forever haunt my life with its deep, swallowing darkness. And that's the end of it. He let me leave with the silent promise he'd return. The news never reported a pitch-black night or houses with ritual graves in their cellar, straying my story further from any believability. As such, Mother's disappearance and death was ruled unsolved. I hope that even if you don't believe my tale, you'll remember it. I'm terrified of the dark, because even when the light returns, it's never quite the same. Story 8. My holiday horror. It was when I was around 11 or 12 that my family and I took a vacation to the Spanish island of Fuerteventura. We arrived late, very late, somewhere around 10 p.m. The island was quiet, the roads nearly deserted as we made our way to the remote Airbnb we'd booked for the week. It was far from civilization, tucked away where there were no streetlights and the signal barely worked. When we pulled up to the house, my dad dropped us off and headed to the supermarket for supplies. My siblings and I, exhausted from the long journey, decided to settle in and watch TV. But within minutes, something strange began to happen. One by one, the lights started to flicker and then turned off completely. It was unsettling, considering the isolation of the place. The night was pitch black outside, and our only source of light was an old, unreliable flashlight. We sat in the dark for what felt like an eternity, about 30 minutes, until the lights suddenly came back on, just as my dad returned. We shrugged it off, convinced it was a simple power outage, and for the rest of the vacation, things seemed fairly normal. That was until last night. I woke up in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m., to a faint tapping sound. It began as a distant noise, but it gradually grew louder, more insistent, as if something or someone was getting closer. I shared a room with my younger sister, who was only 7 or 8 at the time. The tapping seemed to affect her too, as she started crying softly, which woke up our parents. They rushed in to check on us, but as soon as they stepped into the room, the sound stopped. They assumed we were imagining things, so they went back to their room. Still shaken, I tried to drift back to sleep, but the unease lingered. Then, at 4 a.m., my sister woke me again, whispering that she had heard someone laughing outside. Terrified, she asked me to check. I looked out the window, my heart racing in my chest, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Standing on the driveway, barely visible in the moonlight, was a figure. It was tall, about 6 feet, and though it appeared human at first glance, something about it was wrong. Its features were blurred, distorted, as if it wasn't quite human. It stood there, motionless, staring at the house with empty, black eyes. I froze, my mind racing for an explanation, but there was none. It felt like hours, though I think I only stood there for about 10 minutes, watching the figure in the dark. And then it looked up, its gaze locking with mine, and I swear in that moment, I felt like I could see into my very soul. Panic flooded me. I ran to my parents' room, heart pounding, and told them what I had seen. They came to our room, looked outside the window, but by then, the figure was gone. Just like that. They dismissed it as a product of an overactive imagination, but I know what I saw. Something or someone was out there. The image of that creature, those dark, empty eyes, still haunts me. Even now, I can't bring myself to look out of my window at night. The memory lingers, a shadow that refuses to fade. I used to tell myself that writing this down would somehow make it less real, but if anything, it has only made it more vivid. The terror hasn't left me, not really. It's still there, just beneath the surface, every time I close my eyes.